Welcome, everybody, to MogTalk episode 198. If you guys are unfamiliar with MogTalk, it is a show based around the Final Fantasy XIV community discussing everything from Savage Raiding to Chocobo Racing. Today is Saturday, February 29th, 2020. I have to go look at my calendar, to be honest, when I read that off. I'm sorry. Also, before we get too much into the show, of course, we have people already on the screen, so I don't want to be too awkward. I want you to know who's talking, and we'll start with the first person who doesn't really have a camera. Sindalf, can you tell everybody who you are?
Hi, I'm Sindalf. I play Dark Knight for Team Darts Per Second, and I usually have controversial opinions.
Yes, that sounds about right. All right, Sfia.
I'm Sfia. I am a caster main for Thoughts Per Second as well. Been on the show a bunch of times. Always love it.
Oh, well, okay. There we go. Compliments already. All right, Oryza.
I am Oryza. I'm a healer main for Team Tuls is looking for a girlfriend. He still is looking for a girlfriend, so yeah, hit me up.
Maybe next tier if you know.
An entire prog cycle, and you still didn't get a girlfriend. Unfortunate.
All right, and Deon.
Hi, Deon. Ninja main for Tuls is looking for a girlfriend. Melee, career melee, pretty much. So,
Okay.
excited to be on the show.
Excellent. All right, now that we got all out of the way, I'll let you guys know what we're talking about. Obviously, we're talking about the world first race and the various things that included. This tier was actually kind of particular and I would think fairly interesting to cover. We had things like the Method Race the World First, which I was a part of. We had one of the first sleep cycles that in a Savage race that's ever happened in years, not ever happened, but in years. It's been a while. And various other things. And we're going to discuss all that today. And I welcome everybody here. It's been about a few weeks. The stream hopefully looks okay too. I had to redo every single setting in my OBS before we started the show. So hopefully that works out. Guys, please let me know if audio or anything else is off so I can correct it as soon as possible. And yeah, there you go. So the first thing I want to talk about with the World Race, we know about the race and kind of how it went down and everything else. I want to talk about the fights because this is something that is actually kind of peculiar. We saw a lot of stuff that was really... I won't go too much into it. Let me just ask you guys' opinion. How do you feel about the actual fights? Not the world race, but the fights themselves from your perspective.
All right. I'm going to start because Sindalf is going to say the complete opposite to everyone else.
Okay.
I think outside of a couple of sort of fringe cases, most of the fights were really well designed. This is probably my favorite tier in a really, really long time in terms of fight design. The tuning of early floors is a little questionable, but the mechanics involved and the flow and the structure of fights, I think is really, really good and like a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that maybe is because there's no ultimate, but overall, this tier was, in my eyes, a huge success.
Okay. And I kind of want to hear the opposite real quick before we get on to Tuls is a girlfriend. Oh, no, Tuls is a girlfriend. Tuls is looking for a girlfriend. Sindalf, tell me why you have the opposite opinion here.
I don't entirely have the opposite opinion. I think like the second, third, and fourth fight are all very good. The third fight needs some work. It feels a little incomplete to me. The first fight I think is actually terrible, but Garuda and Ifrit, good, could be a little harder, and I think Shiva's pretty good. Except I'm not a fan of some of the chi strats we're seeing out there now. That kind of invalidates the mechanics, but we can get into that later.
Sure, absolutely.
Overall, it's definitely way more fun than
okay.
Titan was, or that tier.
All right, and now Tuls, you guys, we're just going to call you Tuls now, and so he's not even on the show, but we're just going to call you Tuls because it's easy. And I guess, Oryza, what's your opinion here on the tier?
I think this tier, for me, this is still my favorite tier since I started rating, which was in Creator. But obviously, it's still kind of new, so it's hard to say. I think like there's small issues on certain fights, but on a generalistic sense, like I think each fight is really good, and I would say that each fight is better than its Eden's Gate counterpart. So at least it's better for sure than the last tier that we had.
All right, Deon.
Yeah, being the last one, I get to pretty much agree with most everybody else.
I agree.
But,
Yeah.
but Yeah, I mean, overall, I definitely enjoyed it more than Eden's Gate for sure. I mean, this is the first tier. The perspective I'm coming from is this is the first tier that I've done like blind world race, prog type thing. So my experience is a little different from previous tiers, but I think most of my problems actually probably lie with the third fight in general. I think the first fight is, I mean, I'm going to obviously disagree with Sindalf here. I liked the first fight quite a lot. I thought it had some clever mechanics. We'll get into specifically, obviously, later, but yeah, overall, I had a great time figuring out these mechanics and everything. So
that's actually something that we can go ahead and start diving into is Ramu, which is such a... People either loved it or they hated it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know from my perspective here. I witnessed it the first time just watching other people do it. So a lot of it's just kind of visual stuff to me. So the execution and everything else, I didn't really get to see that blind execution going into it. While we were discussing it on stream, one of my co-casters, Jess, was pretty much like, I don't like Ramu. And I didn't really understand that too much. But for me, I think everybody was excited for it because it was heralded as one of the most difficult extreme fights in A Realm Reborn, right? That was like one of the, hey, you actually had to pay attention and do mechanics and orbs and everything else, unless if I'm wrong.
I think it was very true to the original Ramu fight, where it was sort of everyone's responsibility to manage their own orbs and things like that, but it's just more that in the old Ramu, only 2 people ever really had to interact with it. It did a much better job of really modernizing what the old Ramu fight was and putting it into like a Savage context as opposed to an EX trial. Mm-hmm. I think it was very good in that regard. Some things I can understand why people don't like, and particularly people who play jobs that have to hit the boss at a close range, which is probably why these people don't like that fight. But for an opening fight, it could have been a hell of a lot worse.
All right. I mean, it looked like it was a good opening fight. I mean, compared to, like, if we want to throw back all the way to, like, what was it, 09? 01S, right?
That's an alt-right, yeah.
All right. So I was killed in one pull. This one took at least an hour or so, right?
Yeah, E5S actually took a long time. Something that I was thinking about, not just about E5S specifically, but the whole tier, is going into it, we got like a lot of mixed messages about who was actually designing these fights, right? Because we had that Famitsu article which talked about all the developers on Eden's Gate, and they talked about how the same dude had made all the last tier fights from, way back in the day. We don't actually know conclusively who designed each of these fights throughout Eden's verse, but you can tell almost just like instinctively that the fights are designed in a way that is very different to what we've been used to lately. And I think it was a success, and I think most people agree with that.
Okay. Sindalf, we interrupted you a little bit. I don't know if you still remember what you're going to say.
No, I was going to say Ramu's a bad fight. So like my reason for this is that if I try to play out the fight in my head like it's rotation, the animations or like what you actually see Ramu doing, it kind of all blends together because it's all just a giant flashy spark that goes up in the air that eventually is going to do AoE damage. The stack the like balls, the buffs that you get, there's no point to them because all you have to do is go pick one up before mechanic happens, and that's it.
Well, I love Sfia's face. I'm just watching Sfia's face.
You just go and you pick one up. And there's like no thinking about it. Somebody in Mike is like on your team's like, okay, everybody pick up a ball now. Everyone goes and pick one up.
Means it is thinking about it.
No, there's no thinking about it because that means one person.
Just because you don't think about it doesn't mean that nobody
thinks about it. You don't have to think about it. That's the problem. You could maybe if it actually did something, someone in the group could have to pick up 2. Someone could
that happens. That's a mechanic.
Yeah, one person.
I went ahead and turned down the audio because of how upset you made Sfia. He was capping out, so I turned that down a little bit.
One person, the tank. But it's like that specific thing where I was hoping that we'd have to say, okay, we have to ration out these balls. We have to start thinking about who we're giving these stacks on. We don't have to think about any of that.
Okay.
Also, random duty action. I hate that. Absolutely hate that.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. So I'm going to actually ask... Tuls is looking for a girlfriend. God damn it.
That's why we picked the name.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you guys, kind of going through it your first time, this, of course, all being a different experience that a lot of people experience normal rating at, which is blind and everything else. As a blind fight, did you enjoy going through that fight?
I guess I'll go. Yeah, I thought, like, as far as a first fight goes, right, the first fight, our expectations have to be kind of low because usually they're just very straightforward. Like you said, out there, right? At least it's better than that. I think, like, in particular for us, I think, like, Fury's 14 was, like, the real standout for the fight, right? It's like, what is this duty action? Why, like, how do you get rid of these spear things? I don't know what they are. Those things in the ground, like, that you have to get knocked through. It's just like, that is, I guess, something we haven't really seen before, like getting knocked back through something. And it kind of was, I guess, more of a puzzle than I expected for our first fight. So that was, at least for us, that's why it took longer, and it was pretty fun. And then after that, I think the other thing that comes to mind was Chain Lightning. It wasn't hard, but it was definitely like why I didn't expect this to be in a first fight. Like, the first time you see it, you kind of know how to do it, but it's just like, oh, okay, wow. I didn't think they would have something that's like somewhat like punishing and like requires a little bit of execution in like the first fight, because my expectations are low.
Okay.
Fury's 14 was really kind of baby's first Heaven's Fall trio, right? It's the same principles, just put in a really, really simple way and like visually obvious, and it makes a lot of sense as opposed to having to be reactive and things like that. It's like a really, really watered down version of what difficult mechanics are actually like in this game. So it was, I think in that regard, it was a really good introduction to the tier.
I mean, that's kind of why I don't partly like that, because it's the same thing every single time. I know I'm like, for the way we do our lineup, I'm number 2. So I go there every time and they do the mechanic more than once. That's not fun, that's boring.
How would you change that in the opening fight of a tier?
I would have made Garuda and Ifrit the opening fight, personally.
But that's not the question I'm asking.
I wouldn't have made Ramu. I don't know how I would have changed it. I'm not a game designer.
You're a game experiencer.
So you'll complain but offer no fucking valuable feedback, don't you?
Exactly.
Okay.
Fair enough. Deon, do you have anything to say? I know I'm coming to you last again to give you all the follow-up opinions here.
Give me the softball ones. I do think, because I'm pretty sure there are a pretty extreme excess of orbs for the most part. One of the things I was thinking, I don't know if the rest of the group was thinking, probably in the back of their heads, was that in the original EX, if you left orbs out, his attacks would actually be stronger. And if you left too many orbs out, then you would just be getting one-shot by things. So I was trying to think, it's like, okay, do we need to, because obviously, like, you have the mechanic where the ad targets the person with the highest stacks. It's like, okay, do we need to ration these out in terms of, you know, the off tank gets 3 and some other people get 2, and you've got to kind of, but it's really just sort of get a stack and make sure you have one.
It's a thing. That mechanic you're talking about is actually a thing, and I saw it in a pug.
Oh, is it?
I've got a picture of a line of text that pops up, and I'll show you it. I'll put it in chat.
Put it in the stream chat if you can.
This is a... Where's stream chat? There it is. Oh, just... Yeah, there.
Okay.
This like if it actual... is, it's completely new to me. I'd not...
Yeah. It exists. It's what happens when you get too many orbs on the field and everything starts one-shotting.
Wow.
Okay.
Wait, what?
but you
I guess we just never
encountered
that. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess because they're pretty much just. I think very early on in Prague, I said there's really kind of no harm in just always making sure you have an orb for something. So, I did like Fury's 14. I like the way it's communicated and the fact that, you know, there's 7 sticks on each one and you have to somehow deactivate each one. It's a really kind of, when you stop and think about it, it's sort of an easy thing to think, okay, well, we need 7 people to somehow do something with these to make sure that they. And then obviously we all kind of got thrown off by the duty action. I think the first time all 8 of us just ran in there and was spamming the button.
Yeah, I remember watching. So I guess I'll ask you this, Deon, too, to follow that up is when you were going through it and you beat the Savage tier the first time, how much did you remember that fight when you're done with all the fight?
Not very much.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure we wiped on our reclears on Ramu the first time, didn't we? Like, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Did we?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we one-shot.
I'm pretty sure we had a couple wipes.
Of course.
Some of them were because of me with the duty action, because I learned that if you turn your back to Ramu, he knocks you off the edge regardless of whether or not you use it.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think also our experience was we were hitting Shiva in Rage for like 12 to 16 hours. So there's kind of a lot that we were occupying our brain space with. But
yeah,
and I liked Chain Lightning. I thought it was good that we figured out that you could pass it between 3 people instead of 4, so we could just kind of leave the tanks up there to do their own thing, and that makes it to where the melee can just kind of sit there on the flanks and do their thing, and that really simplifies that a lot. And I like that we figured that out early.
Yeah,
but Chain Lightning wipes are the funniest thing. Just everyone getting zapped one by one.
First time it happened, it's just like, why is this going so fast? What do we do? Yeah.
It's really awesome to see they take this positive direction to where the first fight isn't completely blown over. You have to figure out some things to clear the fight, and I'm glad this exists in the race now.
Even if you look at like normal mode to Savage of E1S, the Eden fight, there's a lot of new mechanics, and a lot of them are actually like quite punishing in the same way that Ramu is. They've really kind of stepped up the level of punishment in these fights if you compare them to old like Omega opening fights, right? Like, a lot of them just give you a damage down or give you a bomb, but a lot of things just straight up kill you now. And the mechanics themselves are actually really creative and not just knockback into slide into get out of AoE, which was the alt-right, which everyone fucking hates.
I will follow that up real quick to, I mean, some people will just say, oh, well, this is just kind of a level of making it more difficult by just throwing in stuff you don't know, so you die. And so people aren't as intrigued by that. They're like, oh, well, after you figure it out, it's easy. I mean, are you happy they're putting these little tiny puzzles and these things you have to put together, you have to die in order to figure it out? Or would you rather it be...
That is literally the nature of Final Fantasy Prog, where it's difficult to solve and easy to execute. That is every single mechanic in Final Fantasy these days.
And I think there's also different variations of that. I mean, there's kind of an example of that with Shiva, but if it's just like an attack with one name is front then back, and an attack with a different name is back then front, and you just don't know that the first time and you just kind of die, then that's not really a puzzle. Like I do have some issues with that, but I mean, things like, so when he gets the buff, the like power volt buff, I forget what it's called, and he does things like the stepped leader, like how when he doesn't have the buff, that's essentially a twister where you have to move once the cast bar finishes, but when he does have the buff, that's a donut where you die if you move when the cast bar finishes. So that's kind of a little, like, you can sort of figure that out if you think back to even just like Eden Prime, like when it does Paradise Regains and that sort of thing. So there's little things that you'll probably die the first time you see it, but you can think about it and be like, oh, like I can see the logic behind this and put it together.
To me personally, overall for the game, that's really good game design, because it means, hey, these people want something challenging day one. They have something challenging. They have to figure it out, and how fast can they figure it out, right? How fast can they put all the pieces together? And then the difficulty severely goes down for everyone else later on. I mean, they could keep it difficult if they want to stay blind going through it. They have to try a little bit to stay blind, but it does allow people to enjoy raids in this game without it being super punishing and difficult, and where their group would just fall apart.
I think that's particularly true in Shiva as well. Like Shiva has like light rampant, which everyone knows. Like, well, at least for us, like it took us like, I think it was over an hour to figure out what was going on and like solve the mechanic. But then obviously when you just know the strat, you just do it. But a lot of Shiva is week one. If you mess it up, you get a damage down, you might die. Depends on the mechanic, but that's like a really big deal and it makes the check really hard. Give it a few weeks and like none of that will matter. You can mess up all over the place in Shiva because Shiva very, very rarely wipes you if you mess up. There's like light rampant. There's the second light rampant, I forget what it's called. And then there's like
that's Dragon Song, something. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah, but that one's like also a lot easier. And then everything else, like if you die, your mechanic goes on someone else, or it doesn't really matter. Maybe one other person will die. You'll get a damage down. Like even if you die before Worm's Lament, someone else gets your debuff, the red or blue debuff, and then that person just does both debuffs, and like nothing happens. It's just like the fight doesn't feel too bad.
I think there's a few more mechanics which will wipe you. Things like Archmorns being the 2 debuff that they are. But in terms of like, if you compare that to Titan, for example, there's still way more wiping mechanics than there are in Titan. The only thing you can really wipe everyone with in Titan is putting the blue in the wrong place. That's how you kill everyone, or fucking up the jails. That's kind of it.
Yeah, I think Titan is also similar. I think Titan's similar. I agree. I just think like they're like doing this type of difficulty that really only shows up for the first few weeks and then it goes away, and they've been doing that for like a little while now.
They've found a really healthy sort of middle ground for both people like aggressively attacking the content and for people to clear it later on. But that's mostly E8 related, which we'll probably get to later.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. And a lot of the perspectives, by the way, everybody watching the show, this is, blind world first perspectives. We're not talking about like all the time. We're not really going into, the fight's overall designed for the regular player. We're talking about people who are grinding it really hard the first day it comes out. Because that's an interesting perspective. Not a lot of people actually can give that perspective, and that's why I brought you guys on. So, Sindalf, what do you think about the second turn? You said positive things about it, right?
Yeah, so I like the second fight partly because there's gameplay.
Oh,
is the best way I can put it.
Okay.
So
okay.
you're going to be moving around the room a lot. Like Garuda's going to force you to go places. You're going to have to actually handle the whole tethers coming out, breaking them, picking them up. And then once like you have a person like Ifrit coming in and dashing at everyone, you don't know which one he's going to end up at. And it causes a type of chaos. And I like that chaos.
Which one he ends up at for the tethers. It's the original person marked.
Don't ruin this for me. I didn't know that.
Can I say that the cutting of the tether with the wind orbs is really, really cool.
Let's not talk about cutting tethers.
That is such a cool mechanic. It took us like a pull to realize it, but just the interaction between different bosses' mechanics and the fact that there's a new interaction which we've never seen in the game, which is literally cutting a tether, which is tethered to a player. That is just a really, really cool way of doing things. I think it's really, really like creative. Whoever made this fight is just good developer brain.
We cleared the fight without knowing that.
We took an entire prog cycle to figure out that.
Someone told us the day after, I think, that the tethers,
we were seeing that on stream, and we're like,
we noticed that like something was happening because occasionally Krem would get one of the like protean tethers at the very beginning, and when she went to the front of the boss, it went on somebody random. So we're just like, maybe you can't be directly in front or something, and we tried not doing that, and it worked. So we just never looked into it.
How'd you do the tank buster when you had both of them on the field?
You can invoke, and it will.
Yeah, we did a tank swap. Yeah.
I mean, that's beautiful.
And we had
you can't hit it.
Yeah.
We also, in that sense, thought that the Ifrit tethers were more strict than they actually are, because when we have the DPS in the middle and they're getting targeted by the wind orbs, we had like one time one of us accidentally went left and one of us went right, and our tether actually got cut by the wind thing. Yeah. But we thought we just died because we were too far apart. So we're just like, okay, everybody needs to stay right on top of each other. So we found a million different excuses to not arrive at the conclusion that the tether was being cut. But
that's awesome.
That actually ended up happening in our clear too. Tuls got his tether cut for one of the very last mechanics. It went on somebody random, and we had to heal our LB to recover. Right before.
Oh, I just hard raised 4 people.
Oh, you did?
And then we killed it. Yeah.
So how WoW gives you achievements for doing fights in particular ways? I feel like that would be an achievement that you would earn afterwards, before you're doing it in a difficult way to clear it. All right. So the other thing about this, did you guys have any? Of course you didn't. There's no way you guys could predict that they said, "Oh, well, we're going to take Ifrit and Garuda and just smash them together and make some beast out of it and give it some name no one would ever think of."
Pretty sure the name that it has is reused in other Final Fantasy games, but I can't remember exactly where.
I know it means something.
It means like red wings or something like that. Crimson wings.
Sounds about right. And of course the noise. Yeah, everybody's saying in chat. Well, how do you pronounce that? Gwoo? Like how do you gwoo? Like what's that noise? That
every time the transition happens, everyone on the team just has to go gwoo.
Speaking of combining the two bosses, the theme for this song was really good and did a fucking awesome job of like encapsulating that.
That's
Really
actually
good soundtrack.
a good question for me to ask you guys. Do you often get distracted by the visuals and the music and everything else while you're racing, to where you're like, you stop thinking about the strategy and you just start just watching things, and you start just listening to the music and paying attention to it? Do you find it distracting by any means?
Visuals sometimes, depending on the actual visual on screen, can become like too much to actually understand what's happening. That happens to me a lot less, but I remember back in like the turn 9 days that would happen to me all the time, trying to like just take in that whole thing. But I've heard of a lot of players start muting the music because it becomes too tense for them. Like Golden Bahamut was a big thing, or Ultima. But that's never happened to me. I raid only with music exclusively.
I think most people who raid hardcore kind of get desensitized to it, because you realize that you have to be more focused and not get into that like feeling the vibe headspace, but you've got like a goal essentially, and getting distracted detracts from that. That's not to say that it doesn't happen, like cutscenes and things like that you can still get hyped for, but it's usually a detriment to actively like be super invested in the music or super invested in like a cutscene or something that's going on, because it literally just it takes away from your focus and things like that. So you got to kind of actively tune it out.
Do you just turn off the music to do it, to tune it out? Or go ahead, sorry, Deon.
I was gonna say, I will say there have been times where I have used music as a cue for something.
Right.
Yeah. I remember. It's like there are especially times where like there, you know, even in Shiva, like where there's a transition and then the music starts and the boss starts at the same time, so the music is always at the same place, always like whenever a mechanic is happening. And I mean, I remember times even in like Nail, for example, where I know there's a specific like chorus that comes in and goes, oh, this is my feint. So like it's there can be times where like, I mean, yeah, obviously the Golden Bahamut music is like you're already 18 minutes into the fight or whatever at that point and you're shaking, but there can be times where for me personally that I actually kind of use it sometimes.
Any fight where a phase change triggers a soundtrack change can be used for like audio cues, and I myself use that a lot as well.
Okay
Yeah.
I am one of those people that I had the in-game music on the entire time.
Oh, nice.
Me too.
Like a good example of that is you know when Ifrit in Uwu like makes your ears bleed?
Oh yeah.
With that awful
doing the stack.
feedback loop that it does. Yeah. That's my like cue to Adel.
It's doing the stack, yeah,
exactly. Everyone remembers it because like you're like, oh, my ears, but I know now. Adel, my ears are bleeding.
Nice. You know, I wonder, and I'd love to ask this of, I can't imagine this is true, but I would think that maybe Soken and the game designers would work together for certain mechanics to line up with certain points of the music or something.
Do you want me to ruin all Final Fantasy music for you?
Sure.
It's all on 30-second loops, and that's why. They design everything around 30-second loops, and then they make mechanics around 30-second loops. So
is that really true?
It's one of the things you notice when you play Ninja, because your trick attack is every 60 seconds. If a boss jumps when you're about to do trick attack, it's going to jump every time. Like anytime you're about to do a trick attack is potentially a time that the boss jumps. That happens in the second phase in this fight, or the second fight in this tier, I think.
Okay. So. All right. Well, I don't care about this game anymore. Let's end the show. No. The other thing, there's something else I was going to ask with that, and I completely forgot what it was, so I'm not going to ask it anymore, and we're going to move on to the third fight. If I remember it, we'll go back. Well, is there anything else you guys want to talk about with Ifrit and Garuda before we move on to Bird fight?
There's actually a lot going on in the Ifrit Garuda fight. We've only talked really about the tether cut mechanic,
right?
But the tethers with the flame tornadoes, that in itself is another one of those puzzle mechanics which they've added into Savages now, which you actively have to sit back, look at footage, and solve, as opposed to just like seeing it once and be like, "Oh, this is how it works." Do it.
Yeah.
The addition of these sorts of mechanics makes blind prog harder, but it also means that they can be more varied in the types of mechanics that they put into fights, right? Like this sort of thing never existed in a second fight before, as far as I can think, right? Where you've got very, very, very specific roles in this type of map interaction and things like that. And it's super punishing as well. It's literally tank buster after tank buster after tank buster on a tank. It's like that level of punishment and damage values and things like that, while everyone has their own individual responsibility, even though it's low, for being a puzzle mechanic is really, really high. So I think it's like a really, really good direction that especially the earlier tiers are taking, where like Fury's 14, and what is the name of that mechanic? Where he puts tethers on everyone and you have to do the fire tornadoes?
Conflict Strike.
Conflict Strike, yeah. Those sorts of things are really good additions.
Okay.
I mean, I would agree, at least with Conflict Strike to an extent, except for the fact that as a tank, it is extremely boring. You stand in a corner and
I'm going to be honest with you, Sindalf. Every single time we talk about a fight, you can easily just say, as a tank, it's boring.
That part is boring. Like, wait till you do it, Frosty. All you do is you run into the corner, hit all your cooldowns, and then you hit shield lob over and over. That's all you do. You don't do anything else.
I mean, I agree.
I don't like mechanics like that because that's anti-gameplay. You're not moving around. You're not making a decision. You're just sitting there.
Anti-gameplay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. It's like Diamond-backed.
A lot of people dislike this tier because melee uptime. All right. Here's my opinion that you're all just little bitches, because honestly, saying that a fight or a mechanic is bad just because you don't get uptime is like,
no,
that's stupid. That's stupid.
No, that's not what I'm saying, Sfia.
You're not entitled to 100% uptime.
What I'm saying is not uptime. If I had to run around in a circle, that's different. That's me actively doing something. If I had to make a little dodge left and right to dodge the like tether cutting mechanic, that'd be a little different as well, because then I'm doing something. But I'm literally standing still the entire mechanic. That's not gameplay. That's the worst part of the fight right there.
Okay. To go off a little bit of what Sfia said too, I do agree with you, and my bad opinion on it is pretty much, I think it makes it more interesting to force you out of a rotation and figure out how to recover from that. I feel like that's an interesting part of the fight, but again, that's me as a spectator and analyzing the fight afterwards. But with tanks in particular, Sindalf, I absolutely agree right now that Final Fantasy XIV tanks are not, they don't have a lot of interesting parts of the fight. It is what it is. And I feel like every fight should have boss movement and some sort of positioning that, like, oh, well, this is a really good tank because he knows exactly when to pull the boss to his exact spot and an art in the right direction. That's great. But
like a really good example of that in this fight is I think it's the last soccer/football section where Ifrit comes charging at you as you're dodging. So what typically ends up happening is you have to say as a tank, okay, where is my party located? If they're all stacked together to like the left side, you can stand slightly to the right, you don't hit anybody. Or you stand slightly ahead of everybody and nobody gets punched either, and then the tank swap and everything else can happen. And this is like during a really chaotic and heavy movement moment. Like that's a good spot for tanks. That's where
I think I've seen in Pugs actually that tier that you're talking about, where there's like the hot wing from Nidhogg, and the dash goes out with the eruption at the end of it. A lot of tanks just put that in the hot wing, or they put it in an orb, which is what happens there. So they just take a Von stack to make so the eruption isn't on the whole party.
That's no fun though.
That's also, party finder. You gotta simplify it, man.
I don't think there's actually a penalty for the party getting hit by that tether either. They get lightheaded, but then there's no other tether mechanics after that to actually punish for it. Because I think we've got hit by that pretty early on in Prague, and it was just kind of fine. And then we figured, well, we should probably just put the tank in front.
There is none unless the other tank gets hit and you were planning on tank swapping, which there isn't enough damage in there to really either not have cooldowns up or an invuln, because you're not really using them elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, you kind of actually, like, not to pivot really hard, but you kind of actually brought this up, and like getting hit by the orb and like the not a lot of damage stuff. Like, this fight doesn't do a lot of damage in general. This is my first Savage tier healing, so like I don't really know compared to other Savage tiers, but like I mean, PS right now, like I go into pugs and they're just like, yeah, you just get hit by the orb because we don't know how to dodge it. But also this Volt stack does not matter, and it's just like, I don't know. That was like the one thing that I think is really dumb about the fight. It's just there's very low amounts of damage, so everybody gets hit by the Ifrit dash. Does not matter. You get hit by an orb, does not matter.
It should be a damage down stack, dude. Just get rid of all these vulnerability stacks, dude. Just damage
down
down
on everything. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Our healers actually made a comment about that across the entire tier, that the amount of outgoing damage is pretty low. Just in general.
It is.
That's, I don't necessarily think a good thing, but it also means that when we get gear, we're gonna fucking destroy these fights.
Absolutely.
Didn't Yoshi or somebody else say in an interview that they think that healing's currently too hard or there's too much damage? I remember you mentioned this before, Sfia.
There was one part in Titan that, you kind of hit that point where healers are going crazy.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like there needs to be more parts of these fights where you're like, I have to decide between DPS and healing and do a lot more healing, and don't have time to DPS as much. That would be interesting, but it's always going to get outgeared, right?
Well, if you want to compare that to Titan, there is one point in Shiva that should be, but then we can just tank immunity, so it's not. But like maybe that's just an oversight, and they planned it to be,
There's no way that's an oversight. No
really?
way.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, because it's targeted on the tank specifically, so
and it functions that way through the whole fight. What you were saying, Sindalf, I was referring to an interview they had where I'm not sure which developer it was, but they're talking about how the developers think that healers are healing-wise weaker than they were in Shadowbringers. Sorry, in Stormblood, which just isn't true.
Yeah.
I think the reason they think that is because relative to GCD strength, HP pools have gone up. So, it's an indirect nerf to healing potency because it does less of a percent of a person's HP bar. But we've got so many more tools now that it's just not true.
Yeah. I'm going to take a second to just do a realization Deon, what role do you play again?
ninja melee.
Oryza, you did healing?
Yep.
Sindalf is ranged. Oh, no, that's Sindalf. Oh, sorry, Sfia is ranged, and Sindalf is tank. So I literally got every single role covered on the show, except for, like, the support, whatever. Yeah.
I'm a support. I'm a ninja.
Oh, it's true. Okay. I didn't plan that, so thank you guys for doing that for me, because that will actually give us a lot more perspective here. All right, I guess we should move on. Do you guys want to move on to the fight 3, or do you feel like there's a couple more things that we want to talk about with 2? We can go in depth if you want.
I will say with 2, I think the very first time we got there, we got to like the 3rd phase just by like zombieing people.
Yeah.
Which I feel like, because they're using the first phase as like there's the Garuda phase to introduce the Garuda mechanics. There's an Ifrit phase to do the Ifrit mechanics, and then it's kind of both of them, and then they fuse. So, I don't really know what I would change there, but it just kind of feels like those first 2 phases feel a little bit insignificant. I know they're just there to introduce the mechanics, but
I have a quick question.
Sure.
For your team, was the hardest mechanic, or at least the most inconsistent mechanic for players, the Garuda knockback?
Yes.
We had a lot of trouble with that. Yeah,
definitely.
Very visually unclear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I dislike about that mechanic.
Well, is it clear now?
No, we just kind of know where to stand.
Yeah, you only know it because you've died to every other spot you could be standing in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
In normal mode, they actually show the AoEs for a second before they go off, but they didn't do that in Savage, so.
Do you guys, so you don't like that as something they added to it? No?
It could have been
This-
clearer.
Okay.
This game is all about like the way it displays safe zones and the way that you can, differentiate where you can and can't stand. And it doesn't do that for this mechanic. So people really suck at it, myself included.
And the explosions are big. Those explosions are huge.
Oh,
on the
yeah.
orbs.
Yeah.
There's times where I think I'm close enough to the wall and I get nailed by it.
I will say, watching this fight again as a spectator, it was awesome to watch because I wasn't expecting half the stuff that was happening on screen. And I think that fight was about an hour and a half. That sound right?
Not for us.
How long did we take for it? Let's look at the spreadsheet.
Oh, the spreadsheet.
About 2 hours.
2 hours?
Exactly,
Okay.
I think.
I think it took us like 3.
Oh,
A
was
little
it?
less than 2 hours for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that sounds about right for the second fight of a tier, right?
I still think that's very fast.
Well,
I think too fast. But then again, I'm always going to want harder content. So
Absolutely.
maybe my opinion isn't.
I mean, it's always been like the first 2 fights are pretty relatively straightforward and you can clear without too much difficulty. And then the third one, it ramps up. And then the fourth one is the hard one. All right.
Well, I don't know about that for the third one, to be honest. But
Well, I mean, that seems-
maybe we'll go into that.
Let's go into the third one. Let's go into the third one here.
Before starting on the third one,
Yeah.
can we talk about the Enrage in the second one?
Sure.
And that it's more strict than the third fight.
Is it actually?
Yeah, we actually in our re-clears this week we actually enraged on the second fight.
We also all died. But
Yeah, but I mean, you know, we've got
you
some
can do that
gear
on the
and
third
it's-
fight too, and
Yeah.
be fine.
Hmm.
The Enrage on the second fight feels a lot tighter, and I think the reason for that is that during the Garuda and Ifrit on the field at the same time phase, they probably didn't account for them having the firewall debuffs.
Mm.
So they thought that there was going to be a 2-target phase.
Wait a minute. You, as in the developers?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay.
It's like a 10-minute 30 Enrage or something like that, which is very, very short.
Hmm.
So I assume that the reason for that timing is because they assumed that was going to be a 2-target phase, and then they added the firewall in afterwards and didn't account for that.
You know,
I haven't done any E7 pugs really, but my experience with E6 pugs and the DPS check being tight is like 5 or 6 people would always die to like one of the last sets of the tethers, and then you'd like 2% enrage or something.
Right, but even considering that, it's still easier than the next fight.
Oh, you mean
in
it's
E7
not-
you can have a ton of deaths
Okay.
and be fine. It is
Okay.
so forgiving at the end of that fight.
aren't you a healer? So if people die, it's your fault, right?
I believe you're causing pugs to enrage.
Yeah, jeez. World first progger here. No. So, okay, going into the third fight. The third fight is... I don't know what it was about it. Just seeing it, and I mean, hearing opinions afterwards, you know, it kind of solidifies a little bit of disappointment. But seeing it, like, there's nothing I could attach to that fight. Like, I didn't look at it and see a boss. I just saw a group of birds. It just felt weird to me for some reason.
There's
What
a
is
little
with-
thing in the middle?
Yeah, what is with Square Enix and Eden and third turns and omnidirectional bosses that are fucking enormous and off the map? I hate it. I hate it so much. But I guess it's like they have their melee paradise turn, right?
Mhm.
Because they don't have to use their brain. But
We
but
hate
it's
doing
like
that,
that,
so
that's been
yeah.
the same thing for Leviathan too. And I mean, we got to this third fight and we're like, this is Leviathan, and then the portals came out and we're like, actually, it's not.
Mhm.
But I mean, it does have a boss. There's a little idle thing. If you
Yeah,
watch
I
the
know.
cutscenes,
I've
it gives
seen
you more information.
You skipped
but-
them, Sfia, so I don't know how you saw it, but like...
Yeah, I went back and watched them. I'm a content respecter as soon as prog's over.
Oh, okay. I don't know. When we saw it, like in normal, going through it and everything else, it just didn't feel. I don't know. There's no excitement for it. I felt like it just was there. It just existed. Does anyone in your group at all? Does anyone like that fight? And like, oh man, E7S was one of the best fights I've had in a while.
E7S has some really cool mechanics,
Okay.
but that doesn't mean it was a good fight.
Okay.
I think most of my group likes that fight.
Really?
So yeah.
Is it because of the portals and the teleporting around, or what's the merits to it?
So I guess like the bad part of it is the first 2 minutes with just like the portals, but like without the color birds, like just the dodge birds.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my team liked how it was mostly different mechanics throughout. Like it didn't really repeat that much compared to like Leviathan, which is literally just half of it is just a repeat right through the middle until
Okay.
Tsunami 2. I think we really liked the tornado phase because I don't know, I think my team felt really smart when we figured it out.
Yeah, that's mostly the reason we like that
okay.
phase.
Yeah, I think like that. I think my tanks like the ads phase because you have like to drag the bosses around and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, the T11 throwback.
Yeah, exactly. We liked the color, like the colored birds with the portals at first, and now we're learning more and more about it, and we like it less every time we learn something new about it. Like oh, it's actually not random. Like actually does this always every time. Actually, you can stack the AoEs. Just like so. Okay, actually, this
Oryza,
mechanic actually sucks.
I feel like we're getting like a little bit of insight to your group there. You just like you power through mechanics and you don't really understand them. You
No,
just do it.
No.
North
Most of
American
World
prog. North American progression. It's
Okay.
just brute force every mechanic you can. Have zero understanding.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
more
But it
fun
works.
that way.
Yeah.
It's more fun when everything's like chaotic and like. But then once it gets really simplified, or you find a way to cheese something, it feels like you're just avoiding it, and every boss just becomes a dummy. Then
Let's
it's
put it
just
this
like
way.
not as fun then.
Our caster did not know how the portals worked and just followed our tank around the whole time. And literally we
That's what
cleared
I
that
did.
way.
Yeah, it's a very like, and this
Follow the
actually
one
happens a
person
lot
who
in
knows.
E8. It's a very visual like mechanic, right? You have to be looking for yourself around the room and taking visual cues. And for some jobs, it's actually way harder than others, right? Like this tier was probably the worst one to play Black Mage on ever, because you have to be playing reactively on Black Mage, but you've got to be looking at all these mechanics, right? Like wing mirrors and the portals and things like that. Because when you don't know that it's set patterns in the portals, you're literally just playing reactively to mechanics as well as your rotation. So some jobs have it, way more difficult than others in terms of those sorts of mechanics. But those sorts of reactive mechanics became a really, really, really big thing in the third and fourth fights. So having someone, I mean, it's literally the follow Keo strat. It's what we did in T. You'll notice it in all of our fucking clears. Keo has a marker over his head, which is just like my beacon, follow Keo. But it can be carried by one person, which is also a good thing, I think.
Yeah. So during an interview before Prague, somebody at SC said, I think it might have been Yoshi P, said there will be some mechanics that some players aren't good at. And when we went into that fight, I felt they were talking about that fight, because until you simplify it down, how those birds work, at the start, it's like you got to move your camera around all four directions. You got to start looking around and be like, okay, what's to the left of me? What's to the right of me? What's behind me? Where's everything? And it's chaotic and kind of hard to take in until eventually someone else in my group figures it out. And I'm just like, I'm getting frustrated because I don't understand this mechanic, but screw it, I'm just going to follow someone.
Making that, like, the process in your head of actually solving the mechanic, like you can sort of, understand how the mechanic works without viscerally being good at solving it yourself. Same thing with wing mirrors, right? My brain turns to fucking like liquid whenever that thing happens. I understand intellectually how it works, but actually doing it, I just am an idiot. And that's the same thing with the portals, like in Prague. Some people just no good, and I'm one of them.
Nah. Okay, so this fight, I do want to ask you guys what were the major hurdles you had, because this was actually a 4-hour fight. I think overall most groups took about 4 to 5 hours on it. What were some of the things that you guys just hit a wall on, and you're just like, all right, we can't go further until we sit down and talk about this?
We had the birds at the start for sure, and the tank buster, because we didn't realize right away the tank buster was random who it touches. So that actually took just a couple pulls to actually figure out. The birds for sure, and then I would actually say the teleport mechanic took longer than it should have.
No, it didn't.
It absolutely did. We had not to get it all 8 out of 8 clean. Get all 8 out of 8 clean. That took way too long. We got past it very quickly, but for it to be clean, not so much.
Right. He's asking about walls though.
I call that a wall.
Okay.
I call that a wall because now that's going to hurt our ads phase, and it's going to hurt our damage. It's going to hurt our healers and your momentum into the next phase. It's going to hurt your comfort. That slows down Prague. To me, maybe that's not a wall, but that is a hill.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't like hills.
Okay.
They're hard to walk up.
All right.
Ads phase was probably like the biggest time consumer in that fight overall.
It didn't take too long to figure out ads, right? I mean, it's
just executing it, making sure everyone lives, meaning the DPS check. If that phase was taken out of the fight and you replaced it with like, I don't know, something else, I feel like it would have just died faster.
I think the reason for that is our portal, what we do with our warps in that phase is really bad. That's why we struggled with it.
Okay.
Possibly very true.
Yeah.
Right.
It's really bad.
For us, I guess I would also say the wall was the ads, but specifically just the DPS check and having people die before it. I think there was like no real mechanic where it's just like, I don't really understand this. I think we could solve pretty much every mechanic in like 1 or 2 pulls in this fight. Oh, except we actually You know the one with the line stack where like you have to go to the line stack of your color? We didn't realize that like the inner columns have like the birds also shoot down. So like the line stack would be in the inner column because they want to hit the boss, and then just get hit by 2, right? The line stack plus the column and die. And that happened for like must have been like 4 or 5 pulls before like just like, why is this happening? Why do people keep dying?
So there was something that we didn't even interact with at all in prog. You know the portals with the light and dark when you've got the debuffs on you?
Yeah.
And the one that's cheese now. We never saw the variation where you stand in the same one every time. So we assumed. Like, I think we only saw it 3 or 4 times. We got swap every single time until we killed it.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that would have, I mean, that's only like an extra pull to see it and identify what you have to do. But yeah, that's part of the problem with randomized mechanics like that you can literally never interact with one of them.
The everyone here will understand what I mean. The big fist mechanic. We originally, I think we had like 4 or 5 pulls in a row where it was the same, like it was always a white one north south and a black one east west. So we just assumed they were the same, and we did have to go back and sometimes actually they can be rotated, so we had to account for that. But overall, I don't think that took us that long either. I do think I was actually pretty happy overall with our prog. Even the first time we saw like the rotating tornadoes with the orbs, like the first time we had footage of that all the way through, just limping through it, we were able to look at the orbs and be like, okay, these need to go here, and we'll just assume it's the same, and it was. Yeah. So really within a couple pulls, we figured that out.
For us, it was get to tornado phase, 3 pulls later it dies.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, it's very quick.
Okay. So what's the, you guys said a couple of positive good things about it too during all this discussion, but I didn't, you said a little bit of negative stuff, but I didn't hear the really negative stuff. I feel like I'm the only one who talks shit really about this. What's the things that you guys were like, absolutely shouldn't have done this and it shouldn't exist? Was it just the
DPS
familiarity? Or the DPS check? Okay.
DPS check doesn't exist. That is so lenient. Although we found a funny interaction, I think, in one of our reclays on our alts, where the boss interrupts its own cast bar to cast Enrage, which is very new.
Yeah, we saw that too. No, we were watching that on stream, and basically we saw it interrupt its cast, and we all sat there and thought for a second, we're like, okay, well, is this their solution now to, hard timers? They're just going to stop the fight completely?
Yeah, I always just assumed it was trying to compensate for some variance earlier, maybe like how fast you killed ads or something. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Because we've seen ones where you get that first set of empty waves, and then there are more empty waves afterwards, and then Enrage. But it's all based on how quickly you kill ads.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't see the Enrage from the 2 ads, you're typically going to get that extra set of empty waves. But then halfway through, it can just interrupt itself. So
you guys like that change, I'm assuming, right? Because that means that you can't like do some weird stuff with extending one phase and then going into
it's good for the consistency and the Enrage being reliable. But it's bad because your healers are sitting there prepping healing GCDs for this big raid wide that's about to come out, and they're like, oh.
It's a healing bait when I could have just been sitting here hitting glare. But
yeah. All right. Well, let's
I mean,
go ahead.
We got really tired of the first portals mechanic very quickly. Once we figured out that you really only need to look between 2 spaces, and you really only need obviously figuring it out the first time, we kind of had to look around and gauge all the entrance and exits portals, and we realized, these portals, the exits are in the same place every time, and it's always the same intersection, so we can just go. Literally all we needed was Ori would say, is it A to C or C to A? And then that's it. And then we do that for like 2 minutes at the start of every pool, and we got really tired of that really quickly. But
does Ori call out everything for you?
He does most of our calls.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
It also helped that we actually A to C were red and blue, and then the portals was just like, red first, start at A, and that was just our strat. Blue first, start at C because it's blue. But yeah.
Or is it come closer to the mic? Come closer a little bit.
Okay.
There you go. It's all right. It's all right. I know you're getting really relaxed and just laying back. But I figured, I'm going to get the YouTube comment. Oh, I couldn't hear Ori. I'm like, shit, man.
But I mean, I was kind of like, I think Leviathan was worse in the manner of you kind of just sleep until 7 minutes into the fight. But I mean, it did kind of, at least for me, have that same element of, okay, I'm doing the portals. Okay, I'm doing this teleport now that we've like figured out. And I mean, I was kind of sleeping for the first at least few minutes of the fight. But
okay.
Yeah, I think one thing compared to like it doesn't repeat, right? Like it just
right.
Like you do like the wall teleports, then you do like the ice teleports. Like it's different every time. Like the ads phase is the only real like repeats a lot because it's just. I mean, there's like 3 mechanics, so like yeah, you have different combinations, but it's kind of like the same thing. So the ad phase went on a little long. The tornado goes twice, so that kind of sucked too. But like you're asking like bad parts about the fight, it's just like yeah, like those minor repeats, and then again, this fight doesn't do any damage. Like empty wave hurts, but he does it in the beginning, and then it does it like 2 other times before the tornado phase. I think it does it 3 times total, maybe. And then the tornado phase, it kind of does it, but it just spams it. So you're just standing there, also spamming heals in response, which is like also not fun. Like it's just like, oh, it AoEs, I heal. Then it AoEs again, then I heal again, and just like that's
we got surprised by the ads transition, the post ads transition the first time. I'm pretty sure that transition killed like half our group the first time we got there because we just didn't like super mitigate it really. We might have had like a shield or something, but it knocked out like half of us.
It's because the third ad was spamming raid wides. It was the first time we got to the third ad. So we popped all of our mitigation, and then we didn't have any, and then we just all died.
All died.
And we had LB'd the 2 ads before just to make sure we would get through them. So we had nothing, and then just only our tanks live, and it was very sad.
I will say, so 2 things that I like aesthetically that have nothing to do with fight design or mechanics. I really like being able to see your teleport like for 7 seconds as you're rotating around and everyone's purple teleports are just wiggling all over the place. That's hilarious. And whenever somebody accidentally teleports themselves off the ledge, you can see it like, well, goodbye to that person. That's really satisfying. And I like the physics of the birds shooting out of the tornado. They have this
exploding
cool curve
that
they have a cool curve that I think looks
very
good.
Cool.
So that's my praise for the third fight.
I wanted to talk about something that was kind of solidified at this point in the tier in the third fight, which has changed significantly from earlier tiers.
Okay.
As you get further and further into fights, repeats happen less, and you actually get new mechanics as you get deeper into fights. Like, one of the big problems with a lot of Stormblood raiding is that you'd get halfway through a fight and you'd already seen everything there was to encounter in the fight. And that's kind of stopped happening now. You get deeper into these fights now and you're actually encountering new things that you actively have to solve, as opposed to automatically knowing the first time you see it, or being just a literal copy paste of a mechanic earlier in the fight. And that is really, really good because it extends prog but doesn't make it like overbearing. I think victory laps and like copy paste repeats are shitty design. So I'm really, really happy that like we're getting deep, 11 minute into the fight, new mechanics. It makes for a better fight. It feels like old Alexander tiers is the best way that I can put it.
Which are praised and in the Hall of Fame of good fights. So at least most of them. We won't remember A9S, but
does anybody like A2S? Was that anyone's favorite fight?
No.
Oh, I love that fight so much.
I actually really liked A2.
I hate that fight.
It was
one of the worst fights in the game.
I love that fight so much because it was not really a fight that you'd really expect. It was AoE. It was AoE the fight, and someone doesn't have to play their job. Have to get half of it. I thought that was it was nice to have it. It was on the second turn. Oh,
well, wait, you did play a tank.
Yeah, I did.
Press one button over and over. That's your entire rotation.
Can you imagine A2 with the current like TP changes?
Oh man,
that fight would just fall over and.
I mean, you can still do it. You can do it now with the changes.
No, it's more that it would be so easy now because there's no resource management to do anymore. That was the difficulty of A2 at the time, was managing TP and managing how much you can AoE, where your priority damage should be, and things like that. But now you just literally brain off and hit your AoE button.
The difficulty for me
everyone can do that.
Was grabbing the bomb and putting it on the other side of the arena. Because I played Machinist and I was just assigned to do the Walker. Even if that wasn't the smartest decision, that was what I was doing. That fight.
Oh, you could have your turret out and go into the Walker, right, for a long time.
Yeah.
That's why everyone did the Machinist. Yeah. I remember that.
That was one of the reasons. But no, we won't talk about. No, we won't go into that. We're on a completely different expansion. So going
Isn't it
forward,
all just Heaven's Word in the end?
yeah, we all just go back to Heaven's Ward and start comparing things to Heaven's Ward. But yeah, no, going into the next fight. This is Shiva. This is the one that took extremely long time. I think this was a 24-hour fight. If we go back and look at the time, but of course that's including sleep, right? So you have to include that into it. But if I look at it, it's actually a little over 24 hours from what we recorded, because I don't know what they did, if Silent cleared it earlier than anyone else who reported it. But from the first clear we have recorded, which was 1756 on 218, E8S was 2017 on 219. So a little bit over 24 hours. Are we happy? Are we happy with that, guys? Are we not happy that it
Feel
took
nothing but shame.
shame?
I'm very happy with the fight. I'm very disappointed with our play on it.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a really, really good fight.
All right. So it's a good fight. You just don't feel like you keep reflecting to your team's performance on it, which was the first NA group to clear it and world first. Or not world first, world third. You're upset about that performance?
We threw real
last.
hard. We threw real hard.
Okay. I want you to explain to everybody why you believe that.
Surprise, surprise. It's not because of DPS. It's because we made really stupid prog decisions. We tried to push for a day one kill. Is the biggest issue.
I think everybody was.
We got to the last Worm's Lament, and we're like, Enrage is just after this. We should push. And we ended up staying up 22 hours and wasting about 4.5, 5 hours at the end of day one, which got us absolutely nothing. We then woke up, enraged like 1%, with a death on me, who had all the gear, and the dance partner, Black Mage, and we're like, let's go get ruby weapons. Just really, really dumb shit that we did, because we didn't sleep and we were making terrible decisions, and yeah, essentially it was just poor decision making, and then we threw.
I mean, if we want to go beyond that, I think like the first tower set, Lights Rampart, our execution and solving of that could have been a lot faster. I feel like it wasn't until the end of it that we actually started to lay out how we were supposed to solve that mechanic and organize it between us. To make
it took us too long to realize that it was a math problem.
Yeah.
A math
problem.
Math.
Oh, math. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Mathematics.
All right.
Yeah.
But then there was also...
It's like Gavel, and that you can, and we didn't realize that, where you realize how many things there are to interact with, and then you just reverse engineer it from there. The problem with this mechanic, though, is that it fucking just murders you as soon as you fuck up. So you can't actually reverse engineer from the end of the mechanic backwards. You have to go through it, fail to a point, and realize what more can we do now, and then you'll have to change the strat a bunch of times to see the next like thing you can die to, just because it kills you in the way that it does. So it was really, I think, well designed, but it made you think differently from the way that you would typically solve problems like that.
Yeah, now, similar but a little different. The second tower set, Ice, Slit Dragon Song, whatever, I think we solved that relatively quickly. However, we were getting tired, and our execution of it, I believe, could have been a lot much cleaner. Like, you have 4 DPS all doing the same thing.
Bro,
but
don't Isolate Dragon Song, you were right in front of that 2-stack tower and you didn't see it. We didn't realize that the 2-stack tower existed.
You got footage. I got footage.
We all got it.
We all got footage.
Whatever, man.
We were too tired for that shit. But no, like once we actually started executing it and we had a plan in, I feel like the execution of it took a little longer than it should have, partly because one, we were tired. 2, we have 4 people doing the same thing, they're the DPS, and yet they weren't learning from each other. The tanks weren't learning from each other. I feel like, I don't know about the healers. They had enough problems trying to deal with us, the rest of us messing up. It just didn't come together. At the end of the day, the best way I can explain it is that when we practiced and were preparing for Prague, we were playing 5.0. We weren't playing 5.2.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oryza.
We didn't
No, go ahead.
do what made us successful in the past in E8.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Oryza, Deon, does any of that ring home to you, what they're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, as it was the DPS check for most of it, not the bad prog decisions.
Our big glaring problem was just DPS
it was
check.
just DPS was just like, it was like we got ruby weapons and we definitely needed those ruby weapons, and it was like not good.
Yeah, for those unaware, our clear 2 people literally died to the enraged damage.
Oh yeah, I saw.
Yeah.
So that was really bad for us, and I mean it's mostly just lessons learned going forward, and we can talk about the DPS check itself too. But I think as far as progging the fight goes, I think what Sindalf said about the light rampant, I think actually was pretty similar for us. I was talking to our physical range because he's been going over our VODs, and he was just like, yeah, we just wiped till like the tethers, like the people tethered to each other in light rampant for like 40 minutes because people were too close to each other, and we just like, I guess, didn't notice or like didn't realize, because like the thing about that fight is like if you touch an orb, it blows up, you all die. You miss a tower, it blows up, you all die. Like it's just like, I guess we didn't notice why we're all dying, and we're just confused. Like, and now in retrospect, it's very obvious, right? There's a different sound effect. There's a different explosion.
That's what I was gonna say. Like once you've seen it a lot, you learn to realize, oh, there's the like a breaking sound, which means it was a tether problem or whatever. But at the time, it's just kind of like, oh, there's a big light explosion and we're dead.
So
what I would change going back is I would look at light rampant and I would write down exactly what the name of the ability that killed us was every single time. So you'd realize that we died to whatever the tower exploding is called, that doing a raid wide. We died to the 5 stacking someone, and then knowing what each of those, because they all have a different name. You're not all killed by long needle like you are in Brute Justice. You're killed by very specific names to very specific abilities, and that's what I would have, retrospectively changed about the way that we approached it.
So what I would have looked at is a couple things. The one thing I've noticed you like, or is it your team has said like 2 or 3 times now throughout this whole discussion, is that you don't realize what actually kills you. You might want to look into that in the future, because I noticed that when working with other groups, that's really, really helpful, because then you get to put eventually you get to put the blame card on someone, and not for the wrong reasons, but actually so that people are aware this is what actually happened.
Hey, we already mentioned this earlier. That's in a prog, man. You power through it.
But having that information is very helpful. But what I would have done better, Sfia, is I think how we ended up eventually solving it was the right way, which was you have your start state and you have your desired end state that we assumed was correct, which was 4 stacks across the board on everyone.
But we talk about that, and knowing that desired end state is impossible because you have to learn it piece by piece first. And that's what I was talking about before, where it's a mechanic which doesn't let you work from the back forwards because it kills you before you get there. It's not like it does. It absolutely does. If someone gets 5 stacks, if someone misses a tower, if someone breaks a tether, everyone dies. You don't get to see all of the mechanics that you get to interact with in the phase until you've solved piece by piece your way to get there, which is what made that mechanic so difficult. And I think that we shouldn't beat ourselves up for that mechanic because everyone went through the exact same learning process.
I would say you're right, except for you can make sacrifices within your group until you see what you think is the end. You never really know if it's the end until you complete the mechanic. But you can say within a good probability, this is probably the end. Because once, like how we solved it was we wrote down, okay, this is what everybody has. These are what can give them a stack, and for every mechanic or every set of mechanics that hit, be like, okay, here's stack +1. Now the next group, this is the next mechanic. Here's who can take it. That's another.
Here's how many stacks they have at that point. Yeah.
I mean, input and output.
We're also talking about putting a lot of this thought and research into it when we expect it maybe a 4-hour fight, right? And
you never expect 4 hours out of a last turn, not at all.
I mean, before
12 hours standard. 12 hours was Titan, I think, right?
I'll go back and look at it.
I'm pretty sure Titan was 12 hours, and that was the easiest last turn we've ever had.
It was really, really quick. If I can find it, I'll go into it.
8 hours.
It would have been 8.
8 hours.
Wouldn't it have
Was
been
it
6?
What?
Yeah,
Would
it
it have
would-
been 6?
Titan would have been faster. We don't talk about that. 13, 12, never forget.
Yeah. So no,
But
you're right.
You never plan for 4 hours. What the problem with the time frame of the last fight of this tier is that we thought we could kill it day 1. That was the issue, when we should have just been like, nah, we got to sleep.
Mm-hmm. All
Like
right.
there's the lack of sleep leads to mistakes, and it leads to mistakes. When people get tired,
Mhm.
it becomes much easier for someone to become irritable or to start ignoring certain details. Like I remember during the second tower set, Isolate Dragon Saw, I was actually getting hit by the DPS ice every single pull, but it never registered in my brain that was happening because I was tired.
Hmm.
And I know we had at least 1 or 2 wipes because of that. And when you think of how long that fight is and all the repulls, that's at minimum 30 minutes that we threw because of that. At minimum.
Yeah, I mean, we said this after T. Like, sleep is the strongest raid buff, 100%. And it's really hard to gauge in a Savage tier whether you should sleep or not, and when you should sleep, and how much you should sleep, because so much, it's all about time. And when you're pushing a day 1 kill or sleeping, 4 hours or 6 hours or 7 hours or 8 hours, that is a huge amount of time when you consider that the difference between world first and world second was like 3 hours, right?
Well,
that
I'll check.
Could be literally made up from sleeping or not, or how much you sleep.
Mm-hmm. It was about 4 hours, 3.5.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, and I think that's something that we should talk on a little bit here. Is when do you decide? I mean, when do you say, "Hey, we should go to sleep"? How do you know it's the right decision?
You don't. You got to wing it. It's you can set yourself sort of guidelines to follow, which I think we have a better understanding of now. But I think what Keo said was the way that he used to think about it back in the day was, if you're pushing the 16-hour mark and you're not on Enrage, literally having seen Enrage and are battling it, you sleep. The problem with us was that we were hitting that point and we were like, Enrage is probably right after this mechanic, because we were getting to the 13-minute mark. And we're like, yeah, we can kill it today. And we were just done. If the last Worm's Lament, the Mornifar with the dragon head, was a copy-paste of the original Worm's Lament, we would have killed it day 1.
Okay.
But it wasn't. And that's goes back to what I said about the E7 stuff, about how they're adding new mechanics and really deep into fights, that it's not just a copy-paste of an earlier mechanic. That mechanic by itself extended it to day 2.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask this then to follow that up. Do we think that this is actually a good thing that they are putting in these mechanics you have to figure out at the end of the fight? Because when you get to that part of the fight, it's been, again, 10, 12 minutes, and every single pull, you have to make sure it's worth the 10 or 12 minutes you're going to go into it. Like, you have to discuss everything. Like, Oryza, I think we saw your team, every time you guys got to a new spot, you sat there for like a good, I don't know, at least 5 or 10 minutes going over VODs and discussing it, so you had an idea of what to do when you got there again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you happy that exists?
Yeah. I mean, like, well, if we're specifically talking about the last Worm's Lament, like, you see it, you screenshot it, like, you screenshot all the debuff timers, and you see that, like, we saw those 2 dragon heads, and we're just like, oh, I think it's like the same as the first Worm's Lament, but you move in between the Akmor and Mornifas. Like, you can make some assumptions, and then, like, it's not particularly, like, that mechanic is not really like a puzzle, right? It's just kind of like, you see it, you're definitely going to die to it the first time you do it, but then your assumption of how it works is pretty correct, right? You just go in between each mechanic, very similar to before, and then just like, we just gotta set our raid mitigations and stuff like that. So it didn't really feel like, oh, we have to do 12 more minutes to get a little bit more info to solve this thing. It would be a little different if they put Light Rampant at the very end of the fight, it would be a whole different story, right? But like, the only the closest thing we have to that, because like before Worm's Lament was the ice slide with Akrai, which is like, you see it and you just do it, and then like then there's the Icefelt Dragon Song, and that like I think like once we realized, okay, so my team was we didn't actually realize that you could be half the arena across with the tether, which is why we were like confused about the healer getting knocked back once we figured out the tanks don't. But if we weren't dumb about that, then I feel like that mechanic actually is very simple to solve, because you already understand that like you want to get 4 debuffs on everybody for 4 stacks. You kind of know where the stacks start. It's that mechanic is actually a lot simpler, a lot less instant death, I think, in that one compared to Light Rampant. So like,
what hour were you guys on these deep mechanics?
I think we were solving Icefelt Dragon Song around hour 16 or 17, and then we didn't get past it. Like we had a solution that was correct, but we didn't execute it that night, and then we went to sleep, and then we executed the next morning, and then within 2 hours the next morning, I think we saw Enrage. I think that's what happened.
Yeah. So it's literally the sleep thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
day one.
We didn't really have like a hard and fast rule in terms of like when to sleep, like you were talking about with Kyo earlier.
Yeah.
We pretty much were just like, how's everyone feeling? And half the group was like, man, I'm tired as hell. And we're like, okay, just go to sleep and come back tomorrow morning and we'll do this.
I think it's not to interrupt, but like I think for us, our team, like our mentality is a little different, where we're just like not. I mean, you can argue about what racing means or whatever, but like we weren't really pushing for world first. Actually, like I don't know if like this is surprising, but like my team was just like, we just want to clear as fast as we can, and then like the result is like obviously really nice to see, but like that's where we were at. So we're just like, oh yeah, we'll go to sleep, because like we just think.
And that's also why I think between the end of raid night 1 and the start of day 2, I think was like 8.5 hours.
Yeah,
like we got full night's sleep. So
I'm going to go ahead and say something. Go ahead. Sorry, finish that out.
I was just going to say it's like mostly because we weren't really worried about like, oh, we have to push this 2-hour gap in order to get world first. Like if we don't get it, we fail type of thing. We were more just like, we know we're tired. We'll just get a full night's sleep. We'll do it as quick as we can. And it was a little more relaxed in that sort of aspect.
I want to just add on. I thank God that one ace went to sleep a little earlier than everyone else for 4 hours. So we would have something to show on stream while all the teams went to sleep at the same time.
Yeah. Right. So we also our poor play of sleep like doubled down on itself and how bad it was, because we stayed up I think 23 hours on day 1. But when you've stayed up that long, you can't just sleep 4 hours. You've got to get like 7, or else everyone is just a zombie the next day. A few of us like are obviously not much on sleep anyway. Like I think there was 4 of us who were up at maybe 3.5, 4 hours after we went to bed. But like, most people need more than that. So we kind of like shot ourselves in the foot twice as bad by staying up that long. It's actually quite funny because when we got up, we went and did like the dungeon. And people were trying to like figure out, are they going to get tomes to buy a ring so that they can beat this DPS shit? Is that what they're struggling on?
We did that, I think, when we came back after our second night. I think we had people unlocking Ruby Weapon normal.
Yeah.
And then I think we saw later other teams were also unlocking Ruby Weapon. So we thought we were like influencing everyone's getting Ruby Weapon. We've got to hop out and get it. Well, really, we were just doing it because I think Aether slept in. So we're just like, well, we might as well go unlock this in case we need it.
Comments about me getting the achievement from finishing the MSQ, and people are like, oh man, this must be a really tight DPS check. They're farming gear and stuff. No, I just woke up early.
Okay.
DPS check was tough, but it doesn't actually even require Ruby weapons.
But it does require
the DPS check, and I actually tweeted about this. Was really similar in that. Really similar to Golden Bahamut, where it's a don't fuck up check. Where if you get through it, 8 people alive without huge uptime losses, you're going to beat the check. But the problem is getting through a 14-minute fight as opposed to a 3-minute phase without, taking those damage downs, without having people die. That's the difficulty of it.
We had a very much different experience, I think. I'm pretty sure our first clean and rage was like 4%.
4% with Ruby.
And then we had like a 2% clean and rage, and
then we had a 1% to death. And then it was
you run double melee, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
we do.
Yeah, idiots.
Wow.
Hey man,
Look,
they tried.
they tried to get me to learn Black Mage, and
Not enough time. There wasn't enough time.
I'm a melee. I don't have a big enough brain for it. So,
Stick to melee.
yeah,
Oh,
life.
I have
jeez.
to stay in my lane. But,
I think
Range has been prog best this expansion.
Yeah,
no way.
I think so too.
You can, it's just so good.
The DPS check also though, like I think there was like in Prague we had strats that were just not conducive to the check, whereas like now we like people are coming out with way better strats for like light rampant or like just as simple as like you drag the boss to the mirror for scythe kick. Like we didn't do that, and it's just like it's such a huge uptime gain. It's just like
but that's what prog is though, and it's about making that check even with the thing, because comfort is king essentially in prog, and the more enraged pools you get, the more your damage goes up. I think it was Chair who said it a long time ago that every time you see enrage, your damage just naturally increases. And we absolutely forgot that this tier, but it's still true, right? Even if you've got bad strats, consistently getting there is going to increase your damage through to comfort, or finding extra ways to get out that damage.
I wouldn't completely say we forgot that, Sfia. Like, I would say, like, for when we had this discussion, do we get ruby weapons? It was partly the question was, do we do the enrage grind? Like, what's faster, enrage grind, or go get ruby weapons? Because the boss will absolutely die next time we see it with ruby weapons, and that is what happened. We get there cleanly.
We had a really bad pull and smashed it. Yeah,
and it just dies.
Not smashed it,
it's like, and it's like we were right in that regard, but not the right call. But that's still not why we lost. Because like 10 minutes into us farming, we ended up finding out the kill happened.
Yeah,
but
it was just the day one. It was the day one. That's what
I think it's more than that personally, because we got to be more critical. I think our ad space could have been better. Problem solving, just in general, of that. Ad space didn't help, you know that.
Yeah, we should have swapped the healers a long time earlier.
Yeah,
but
ad space was like a mess.
One thing to go back a little bit to strategy and bad strategies and everything else. One thing I like to see every single time this happens is that literally every single bad strategy you guys make gets duplicated at the party finder for the next week or two until people realize there's other ways to do it. I mean, bad strategies, you could say it's bad when you clear it world first, right? But inefficient, right? For people who aren't like at your level and skill of doing DPS, they duplicate your strategies and it just doesn't work until they actually get the right way to do it.
A strat that works is better than anything else.
It's true.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah, and if you've seen it executed and that group can kill the boss using that strat, there is no reason they can't be duplicated unless you're playing with 8 absolute gods who are better than everyone else, which is kind of what that JP team was. My God, their damage was insane. But like, prog strats are always going to be jank. They're going to suck. They're going to give you shitty uptime. They're going to be like times where, I remember our Hello World strat, which we did in prog for Alphascape. Our poor healers were just chain casting GCDs the entire fucking time, and they hated it. But it worked. And that's fine. If it gets you through the mechanic and gets you to the end of the fight, it's absolutely okay, as long as it's not costing you the fight because it's so difficult.
So I'm gonna ask this question to go back into the DPS side of it too, because I don't want to forget to ask this. For TPS, we didn't really see your progression in finding out some of the mechanics. How soon did you realize there was a buff to not feeding the ads to the crystal?
We saw that buff day 2, and I think it was partly because, like, I said that our ads phase was kind of like a mess. So the side I was on, we had a white mage, samurai, dark knight, and a summoner, and we just absolutely blew everything over there up with like not that much work, while the other side was like, oh, we have this meter over here and we can actually just feed.
We had a dancer who couldn't use dances because they'd kill themselves.
Like, it wasn't working out, but the game never actually informed us
that you did something wrong.
So they just kept feeding one of the like aquas the whole time. And then once we actually found out the buff existed and we were trying to go for it, it was like relearning and everything else, and then trying to figure out how to make that whole thing work. And it was just it wasn't great show from our part. We could have just, like Sfia said, swapped the healers, did something.
So
it was
our ads phase was interesting. So I know our Dancer. Well, we started with our Dancer with our gear stack summoner on one side, and our Dancers apparently you can dance the electrics before they get their buff, and then it just insta kills them. So that's what he was doing on that side. And then
Tech step.
Yeah.
You're using tech step and ads.
I think he was. I mean, he's in the chat.
I mean, if you're having enrage problems, that's
it comes back up. I did really look into
get 90s in that phase, but you don't get 2 minutes in that phase, or else you end up delaying them.
Oh, it was standard step. Okay.
Oh, standard.
It did a lot of damage to the ads. But we like basically were like, wait, this gauge like it doesn't mean anything, so let's just like not kill an Alcreus on each side. And then like we're going end of day one. We're not in rage yet. We're just like, what does this gauge mean? Like, we don't understand why you would need 0 gauge. And then we never like, there's no reason for us to like force it. So I was like, dude, what if like it's like an ultimate weapon in rage check where it just starts up with the gauges or something? And we saw we saw the enrage, and then we were like, okay, let's go get Ruby weapon because we need the DPS. And like I wasn't thinking about it. And then while we're in Ruby weapon, someone said on my stream, they were just like, oh, this other group found this DPS buff, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But I do think we would have thought about it like day 2 if no one else hadn't found it, but we were just like preoccupied with other things.
It's actually kind of amazing that we never got through it with 0 gauge randomly, because I mean we had a lot of playful shit talking between the two sides, like, oh, the left side's better, we killed all our ads. So yeah. I'm kind of surprised that we never accidentally just had both sides kill it and ran into it.
It sounds like one of them, I think left side, is easier just because of the order in which they come out. Because they're not the same order. You don't get the same waves at the same times.
Yeah.
I think the east side gets 2 reflect mobs and then 2 reflect mobs and an Aqueous. And that's what makes it difficult. Whereas the west side doesn't get that.
Yeah, we had to move around our DPS for that. Like we moved our summoner away from like the summoner was getting danced, but we just like didn't matter. We separated them for that phase just like so we could kill the ads when we knew that there was like a buff. But yeah, we never accidentally saw it because I think the right side were just like, screw it, we'll just let the Alchemist go in. we didn't even attack it. Like it would just go in at full health and just like, yeah, whatever.
The right side just got lazy. I feel like we should have known, like that should be obvious, right? Like they wouldn't just let you get away with not doing the
should
mechanic.
Be a 9th man mechanic, which we didn't have picked up.
Yeah.
That because seeing it in normal mode should tell you there's a buff to be gained here. But unfortunately we didn't get that.
Our 9th told us he told us after like the other groups got the buff, he went back and checked our normal logs and he was like, oh, you guys got a buff here. And it's like it must be like it's real. So
well, it was kind of weird because this was one of the fights for sure things didn't really match up normal very well. They had a whole different cutscene in normal.
It's just like a savage only phase essentially. It's the entire last
well
phase.
I mean like they put a whole dedicated cutscene to normal mode that we don't ever see in savage.
Thank God.
The Gaia
Imagine
thing?
having to do that every pull in savage.
That also.
Yeah. So I mean, it was just kind of interesting to see that because we were talking about like, what if there is some secret last phase? Like you get to the very end and then they have that cutscene again, and you have 2 cutscenes for the last one, and then you got to deal with a final enrage. And I was sad that I didn't see it. I kind of wanted to see a second cutscene just so everyone could complain about it later afterwards. But how do you guys feel in particular about that cutscene in the middle of the fight?
Thank you, Yoshi P.
Okay.
I mean, it gets old.
Of course.
But it's not so long that it's not E5S, or sorry, E1S cutscene. Right? It's not that egregious, but it's annoying.
It's annoying because I think actually what kind of makes it worse is that you come back for a split second and your hotbars appear and you're ready to go, and then you have to sit there for another like 40 seconds or however long it is. I can see a case being where it maybe wouldn't have fit in that fight, but when you have something that long, some kind of intermission where you can't do anything, it's kind of a break. Like, okay, we've done the thing, we can chill out, and it's also for cooldown resets and everything when you get back to the boss. But I kind of feel like the reason it bothered me specifically is because there were 2 breaks. You have the transition coming out of ads, and then you have the cutscene, and it's like, man, I'm ready to just, hit the boss again. And also, it annoys me because I'm a ninja, and anytime you come back from a cutscene with a targetable boss, you have to sit there and hardcast Huton and hardcast Suiton, and
you can Huton before the cutscene. You do it in the ads. Right at
it
the
actually
end.
lasts
Same as
that
T.
long? Oh, wow.
If you like, are
They've made a very big point of making cutscenes not be longer than 55 seconds for that reason.
Fair.
Or you think that's why they did it, for sure?
Yeah, same thing in T as well. You can Huton before the fusion cutscene, and it lasts until the opener.
Sfia's talking like he developed the bosses
stunned.
himself.
Yeah, it's almost as if the developers actually know what the classes do, and as much as people like to pretend they don't.
the rest of the complaints then. But.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's actually a good compromise. I'd rather have this cutscene at the end than have where you just sit there and you don't do anything for a certain amount of time. You can't attack a boss or anything else, so you can mentally just repair yourself. Because the other alternative to having a little bit of a break is having a checkpoint boss or a door boss, which they said they don't want to do anymore. I don't think anyone wants to see it anymore either, because that's kind of dull. How would you guys have felt if that was a door boss and you guys just ended up starting the fight every single time after that cutscene?
Day one clear.
That would have been day 1 for sure.
If you're assuming that the rest of the fight is how much, 6 minutes or whatever is after that, it's 2 6 minutes with a checkpoint, then yeah, it'd be way too fast. It'd be so easy.
Yeah. And you guys are glad they don't do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But for cutscenes though, there's way better examples of cutscenes in my opinion in the past. I think Golden's is the really obvious one where you're just stunned on the ground, but you take that moment to recuperate and I mean, you can't do it anymore, but you take that moment to replace the markers and a few other things like that.
Sorry.
God damn it, you guys. Yeah.
I think even if I go back to the Heaven's Ward again, Alexander Prime, when he comes up, it's 20-30 seconds. You just stand there, right? You just LB3, but it gives you a small breather, and I understand the point of that, and it's still really cinematic without it being over the top. And I feel these cutscenes where you lose control and you just have to watch this long cinematic, it's just too much. Or Hades, it's just there's too many of them. My favorite is Cruise Chasers, because you just kind of hit a button and then you fly. It's really short, right? But it's still a small 10-15 second break where you go up and you go in the little plane.
So one other thing is that loss of control cutscenes also favor certain jobs. For things like Black Mage, for example, I can't Umbral Soul that whole time, so I'm dropping an Oaken, I'm losing polyglots, those sorts of things. Whereas a job like Summoner, all their cooldowns are ticking, so they get anything that's more cooldown based inherently gets an advantage through loss of control cooldown cutscenes and things like that. Or another good example would be something like Machinist, right? They don't need any resources for what they do, but all they're cooldown based hugely, so everything comes back up in that downtime.
It's great for jobs like Dark Knight because you get your mana back during those, and I can even try and break TBN during the ads phase, so I just come back with full mana, a free Edge of Darkness, and you just unload.
Yeah. Whereas a warrior, for example, would then they've lost eye, they're not getting engaged the whole time. Yeah. There's definitely a discrepancy in how much it favors jobs.
Yep.
So we are getting close to the end of the first part of 20 other parts of the discussion that I was planned and I outlined. But I want to ask you guys, in Shiva in regards, is there anything else you're thinking man, we should really talk about this with Shiva? Not to rush you guys, sorry, but I was thinking if there's something else that you guys felt we really needed to cover with it.
Terrible was that Enrage animation?
Yeah, we thought it was a fake Enrage.
Right?
Yeah, we were like, maybe there's a real Enrage that isn't just this really underwhelming mirror thing. Because everything else in that fight is visually just huge and momentous. Whereas the Enrage is just wings, mirrors, done.
Yeah.
It made me laugh.
I think it was Ara was just no, this isn't it. There has to be something else. And that's when we started looking at the ad phase and things like that, and actually trying to find what was hidden in the fight, which turned out to be something, but it wasn't what we thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it was kind of interesting to see that, because it ended so quickly, and we were debating ourselves, was this actually going to be the Enrage? Because it was, after you look around, you're like, okay, they made it literally impossible And we just made sure there was no little safe spot or anything. We were like, yeah, this is the Enrage, but it was just kind of weird. It did seem a little bit too like, boom, you're done, and that's.
Yeah, I feel like it should have been like a Diamond Dust at the end or something like that, not Hallowed Wing Mirror Mirror. But
yeah, I mean, after doing T and having its Enrage, you kind of
it's
a little bit of a drop
epic
off.
enough to be the last turn Enrage. That was my issue with it.
When I saw all the red mirrors, I think it was just kind of like, oh, I guess it's an Enrage because all the mirrors are gonna do this. I don't see any way. I think I was just really disappointed because it's just like after the Akmorn spam, it's like I really don't like hard Enrages in general. I think they're like really boring. I think I much would have rather seen just lots of Akmorn spam until you die or she dies, right? Or I guess you can add hard rage at the very end, but it would be nicer to see like how long can you last her spamming Akmorn at you. So
I mean, and that's the thing that like healers enjoy too, right? Because they're like, oh, well, if I'm a really good healer, I extend the fight and I make up for DPS in that regard. But
yeah, J-Waves are still the best finish of a fight in this game.
Yep.
No. All right. Well, with Shiva in particular, I guess it's one of those fights that I felt like personally, I like that they did Shiva. I don't like. From a perspective of a casual point of view and looking at the stuff and aesthetics and everything else, that they just kind of like threw Shiva and Hydaelyn, and they have 3 models for this fight, I think, and they just kind of threw it all together.
It makes sense in the lore.
Does it?
Yeah.
Does
because
it?
Because Ice is the closest to Umbral, and so that's like the point at which she gets overtaken, because it is the closest to complete light.
Okay. Yeah. I should bring you on for the lore show next week, Shiva. Shiva.
Shiva?
Yeah, no, it's... well, when they merged the Garuda and Ifrit together, when they did just the horseman remove, like, this stuff just felt like they did it because they wanted to make a really cool fight, then just tried to explain it away.
Yeah. I think the best thing about this tier, well, one of the best things, is that all of the primals are out the way now.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We get new original bosses afterwards, which is going to be ultimately easier.
Do we?
But yeah, we're getting. It just means that the last tier is going to be not primals, and I am so excited for that because God, I'm sick of recycled content.
Yeah.
I don't want to fight Garuda the 17th time in this video game.
It's true.
Original bosses are like they're the most exciting because you never know what's coming next.
Mm-hmm.
Except for maybe E7S. I mean,
yeah. E7S. I hope that's not their like.
Give
their
me
bar for what bosses should be, original bosses at least.
Give me like actual origami boss that like transforms, not
what
pieces of origami birds.
Like the Rubik's Cube guy.
The Rubik's Cube guy
from Mount Golg.
Okay.
Oh, Ozma.
Ozma's the one that morphs around. So I almost called you Shiva again. Sfia. You were talking a little bit earlier in the fight, like we don't really know who develops these fights and everything else for this tier. Like we weren't sure. I mean, in my perspective, I always thought that was the point, that we don't know who really makes these fights until they're publicly renowned as good. Then they say, oh, this person made this fight, right?
It's even more confusing than that because they did an interview with Famitsu a couple months ago, and it came out that they talked about who made the first ones and that one dude in particular was making the last fight for sure. And then they came out in the live letter and said, actually, it's all new developers for this fight, for this tier.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure whether to believe the Famitsu article or whether Yoshida doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But essentially, we don't know who made these. They also feel really different from any raid tier we've had recently.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I'm like leaning towards it being completely new developers, not the ones that we had for the first Eden, which made our prep a little weird.
It definitely feels like new developers, and I think that's actually going to be very good and healthy for the game's longevity.
Absolutely.
Since we're not going to. A lot of times in 14, when you decide to say, like prep for Prague, you can just go through old content, and you can almost always find a way to relate something new you've seen to something in the past. And that's kind of how you explain it to people how it works. But if there's new developers, then possibly with like new ideas, then possibly that won't be the case anymore. we're gonna start getting unique content.
You guys remember back at FanFest, and they were releasing raid information and stuff like that, and we got a big picture of Gaia with a hammer, and that's kind of what we knew about raid.
And we saw a little leaf.
A little leaf. Do you feel? And it was by the guy. Was it the Kingdom Hearts guy that was kind of designing this?
Nomura, yeah.
Yeah.
That he was writing the story and designing the characters for this raid tier. Yeah.
How much do you feel like that happened?
That's absolutely happened. Absolutely. Yeah? Look at Gaia.
Well, Gaia. Okay, Gaia. Gaia. Past Gaia. Let's go past Gaia.
Well, he's not designing fights, right? So.
No, he's designing the characters in the story.
The characters.
So he's writing the scenario which they're making the fights from.
Okay. For some reason, I thought he was maybe helping with the fight design in some way or regards. No, it's all story.
I don't think that's his cup of tea.
Okay. All right. Because that's the only thing I remember seeing is just the Gaia, and we haven't fought Gaia. I don't know if we will fight Gaia. I mean, maybe we will.
It's going to be E12S, Ultimate
so?
and Gaia. Yeah,
okay.
100%.
All right.
Quote me.
It's quoted. All right, it's done. Okay, so wrapping this part of it up before we start going into a couple more bits. I hope you guys are ready to go on for another couple hours. But the fights overall, you guys are content. Besides maybe a little bit of criticism over E7S and of course Sindalf and whatever he says. Yeah.
Wait, one last thing. Shiva had voice lines, and that was amazing, and they need to keep doing that. Yeah. It was just, it was actually like incredible, and I don't know, maybe the bar's just really low, but I feel like
no voice lines versus having them. Yeah, it's low.
Yeah, but it was just like it stuck out really, really hard because like she had voice lines for mechanics too, like the ice floor and the aqua eyes, like the had voice lines paired with them is like. If only Nail had these, like I don't know.
So yeah, no, this is yeah. Oh, boy.
I was terrified that there was gonna be like the Nail RP type mechanics where you have to react to it. Yeah. I was actually really concerned about that I'd actually have to listen to Shiva talk, but thankfully it didn't end up that way.
Yeah. I do hope that they go forward with this and they keep pushing more voice acting into these fights because it does make it more epic. And we've been saying this forever, and now that we have it, we're really happy. And Square Enix listening right now, you know we should keep doing it. So hopefully
I think it's only because it's so closely tied to the main story quest.
Okay, that's fine for me. Keep throwing a raid with the main story quest if that's part of it, right? I do feel it does feel kind of like even though this was supposed to be part of the main story, it still doesn't feel as epic as I thought it would being close to the main story because we are still just going back and fighting what we remember of other bosses. They don't feel like relevant characters that we're fighting, if that makes any sense. We're fighting, and this is again going to like the story and how I feel when we go through the fights. I don't know if you guys can relate to that. It still feels a little bit similar to Omega, where we're just kind of fighting bosses that we're just thrown and made up.
It's because you haven't watched any of the cutscenes.
I've watched the cutscenes, man.
You have?
I actually, and I'm going to say this, and I know this is probably not good, I don't think the story for Raid is as compelling as I thought it would be.
No, it's not. But at least you get some context now, and you don't feel like, I mean, you do still feel like you're going from boss fight to boss fight, but
yeah.
If you don't watch the cutscenes and you literally just zone into Raid, there is zero atmosphere to it.
Yeah. Well, after coming off this huge roller coaster ride of Shadowbringer's story and going into this, it's just a weird feeling. And you can't really... You've had something really good and you're just tasting something like, that's all right. It's fine.
It's got Nomura all over it. That's the problem.
Yes, it definitely does.
Okay. Is that the problem? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Nomura storytelling is definitely a problem.
So
any Kingdom Hearts fans out there?
God. I haven't played through anything past Kingdom Hearts 1, so I can't really comment on it too much. I just know people like it, and I think it's because they like Disney and nostalgia, but you know. Anyways, let's go on to other things besides the aspects of the fight. I feel like we covered it really well in the last hour and 45 minutes. So let's talk about the other aspect of this and how the race went overall and kind of going into a race with a few key points. For one, there was no real emphasis on ACT this tier. I mean,
no ACT.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was so good.
So good.
So just to make it clear, you guys are happy there was no ACT at the beginning for this race.
I missed the DPS meter. That's it.
Okay.
In a tier with an actual DPS check in the last fight, that was the missing thing. But I did not miss triggers. I don't miss anything that goes with ACT.
The frustrating. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, but
yeah,
having no tools at all available to you, that's the prog experience that I'm pretty sure every hardcore progger wants. Mm-hmm. It's just that there are all these things there now that you're just like hurting yourself by not using.
Mm-hmm.
And so by ACT just not functioning, it made for a really, really cool experience. It felt like we were back in Realm Reborn days almost, where everything was new and you just had nothing but your brain.
Yeah.
I mean, the frustrating part was obviously we're up against Shiva in Rage and we have a 4% clean in Rage and we have to try to find somewhere to pull 4% damage out of our ass. It's like
you have no way of knowing what is a good and bad run. Outside of people saying, I think I played that okay. I think I played that badly.
Yeah, and this was a weird thing we ran into a couple times. Our clear actually came with a death, with a DPS death, but we were hitting like 1%, 2%, whatever clean in Rage. So from pull to pull, it felt like there was a lot of variance, and we kind of had no way to sort of square that up to be like, okay, this is the reason that we were missing so much on this pull or whatever. Yeah. So that part was frustrating, but I did really enjoy being able to just use our heads for blind mechanics and remembering things and calling things out. And I mean, we use like chat macros and stuff that we put together hastily and all that kind of thing. Obviously, I've never had, like I said at the very beginning of the show, this is the first year I've ever actually done like blind world prog experience. So I don't necessarily have that background, but just thinking conceptually, I really like that it was just us. You know, it's just us using our skills and our wits and whatever to figure it out, and it's that way for everybody. So.
Yeah, I definitely liked knowing that it was a fair playing field, that there wasn't somebody out there creating fake calibration triggers and stuff like that just did the whole thing for you.
Oh god!
But a lot of players actually depend on having the timer that ACT gives you, where it says, "Oh, we're 2 minutes into the fight." And I've never raided with an on-screen like overlay, but I would really like that in the game by default. And if you're gonna just break ACT all the time, just add that into the game, please.
Knowing exactly the duration of the pull itself, as opposed to trying to reverse engineer it from the duty timer.
There's a lot of people out there who sometimes say, "Oh, let's use our party buffs at this specific time." What are you talking about?
What's going on at that point in time?
Yeah, we're going to be doing math based off of the duty timer on the right side of your screen, and some people don't even have that displayed.
Yeah,
right. We like one of the things that my team talked about after was like we really want a 9th to like write a timeline out so we can just like look at rate buff alignment and stuff for the 4th fight where it matters. And normally in the old, like the 4th fights, I have ACT up. I like look at the timer a lot just to see like where we are in the fight, to see like what buffs are up, and like it wouldn't be as necessary if we just had that timer. I also think I really don't like ACT. I like really don't. I just wish they had an in-game parser and then they just like had no ACT at all. But it was really tilting for ACT for the DPS check for us, where it was just like I think there were members of my group who were getting really stressed and they were just like we like I don't know if I'm like, because if you don't know if you're doing good or not, you're constantly like trying to make yourself do better. So even if you're doing okay, like you just start like feeling really bad about yourself. So like for example, I guess like for me, like after TPS, after you guys cleared, I was like, Raimi, like watch my POV and tell me like how I could be doing more damage, because like I don't know like how we've been on this Enrage for so long, I don't know how we can do more damage. And I know a few other Raid members of my group had similar experiences. It's just like if we had ACT, we'd be much easier to pinpoint like what's going wrong.
Yeah. I mean, and we're pretty much at this point to where Square Enix is never going to put a parser in the game, and they're never going to put any kind of like this stuff. It just is what it is. It's the line has been drawn in the sand. They've already had this discussion and everything else. We'd want to see it, but we know ACT will always exist in some capacity. I mean, a lot of people are saying, yeah, it would be great if ACT was purposely not updated for the first week and everything else. But here's the thing: as soon as that starts happening, okay, well, we know it's not going to be updated. Let's have some people, take his place and update it anyways. Yeah. And
who's going to make the next ACT that works in Prague is the question that comes next.
Yeah. So it's always going to exist at some point. We were just kind of lucky this tier. I mean, we're going to see it at every single tier going forward. There's absolutely going to be some way to parse stuff. No one really wants all the crazy stuff that it comes with, but you have to have it if you're going to be competitive in a racing perspective. And it sucks, but it is what it is. Unless if, Square Enix starts making some really heavy-handed attempts to prevent it from happening, which would probably piss off a lot of people, but I don't know. But overall, again, iterate. You guys were happy that ACT wasn't updated, and you guys were able to experience this back like the old days for a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very special tier.
Special tier. Hold it close to your heart. So we probably won't see it for a little while longer. By years is what I mean. Okay. So when we go back to the perspective of this from a spectator point of view, we had our first Race the World First. Method came in and provided that stream so we could actually commentate and everything else at some of the people who were streaming and everything. Tuls is looking for a girlfriend was part of that, and we know that TPS, you guys didn't do that for the race reasons. There's perfectly good reasons not to. But how do you feel that it existed? How do you feel that there was a stream out there trying to cover the World First in some capacity?
It's awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's a big step in, almost legitimizing World Prague. Because it's right now, it's just like a bunch of people who feel like doing it. But this feels like more substance to it. And making like a spectacle of it, which, it already is, but unofficially.
Right.
It's just cool. It brings everyone together and makes it more of a community event as well.
Right. I mean, I've been a part of this for years now, where I'm just throwing a spreadsheet together, and that's really the World Race. It's a Google spreadsheet with my failed attempts at doing website stuff too. But I mean, I was excited to see it kind of grow and there to be interest in it, and that a gaming company or gaming organization that is typically with WoW and other games and everything else came in and they're showing interest with it too. And I guess we didn't get the response here from Tuls is looking for a girlfriend. How do you feel about this stream existing? Were you happy that it existed? Oh, okay.
Okay. I have a lot of complicated thoughts on the whole thing, but I think if the question is if I'm happy it existed, then yes.
Okay. Let's start with that. Let's start with that. I feel like that's a good start.
What are the complicated thoughts? I'm interested.
Mostly with Method itself.
Okay.
Not like the event. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that's fair. I mean, that's absolutely fair to talk about it. And there's nothing that we should really dance around about that. I mean, from my experience, okay, I was doing the side of it where I was commentating. I ended up doing a good bit more just because I started to get really invested in it happening. And I will say personally, my experience, before I say anything, I want to know how everybody feels about Method currently that's on the show.
Kent, how long you got?
Okay, quick opinion, Sindalf. The quickest you can get.
I'll say I'm a fan that somebody actually wanted to go out and stream this whole thing. That's actually something in free-to-play we talked about it doing sometime. But I am not a fan about the way Method went about it whatsoever. Okay. Very against that way.
Okay. All right. Sfia?
More or less the same.
Okay.
I think in general it's a great idea, but it's a community event for the Final Fantasy community, and it really didn't feel like it was produced that way.
Okay.
So I'm telling you to do the next one, Frosty.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll say more of this. I'm just trying to get the proper feel here. Deon?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a lot of experience with it personally because I wasn't like streaming to Method or anything. I mean, I kind of agree. Going back and having watched it later, I definitely agree that Method it kind of just felt like a platform that in some instances got in the way a little bit. I mean, there were some advantages to it in terms of an audience standpoint, but things that, and I guess we'll get into it in more detail later. But
yeah. All right. And Oryza, we already had your point of view, right?
I will say,
Yeah.
not to be contrarian, but I will say there's one thing with Method that I guess like even it just really brought eyes on the game. Like if Frost, if you were to do it, and I would want you to do it, but if you, let's say you were the Method wasn't there, like it would still be very contained within Final Fantasy 14 probably. But like I've had people coming to like my stream, like even like this week, they're just like, oh, I came to this game from WoW, like because I saw like the prog last week, and like I think that's like a benefit that can't be understated. But there were still a lot of problems with how Method handled it for sure.
Okay. So I'll say this from my perspective, and it turned into really an event that I was very, very involved with. So I have a lot of thoughts, and a lot of people have heard my thoughts, especially in some frustrated situations. But okay, the event's over now, and so my experience is a little bit different than what it was before it started. I will say, working with them, having someone that was there in the background running the stream, they did a pretty good job streaming and putting it up there, so everybody had a point of view. Like we did a perspective where everyone who was commentating were looking at a about 1 to 2 second delay stream for what was going to go up on the stream at the same time. So instead of having 7 different streams up and trying to commentate and hope everybody's like organized and on the exact same moment of every single stream, we had an organized way to commentate over everything, at least about as best as we could really do logistically. And I felt that was pretty awesome that they were able to get that going. The only downside was we couldn't really hear the stream without our voices over it, so we were kind of commentating on a muted stream. And so I would hope, whatever happens next time, that we can do it with voices and everything, because they were kind of taking the ingest from all the streams that were coming in. And so if you guys had bad sound on your side, it was bad sound coming to the stream, and they would have to balance it out. And of course, your stream wasn't the exact same sound levels as the other stream, so they had to constantly balance out all the different streams that they had broadcasting. And so that's 12 different ones. They have to kind of make sure the audio between the people talking, the music, and everything else was good. So that was difficult, and they were able to manage that on their side, and they had people dedicated to do that. That was really, really good. I'm going to go and give that as a benefit too.
Sure. Yeah, the back end is all there.
Yeah.
You know,
and
got the systems in place.
Yeah, and that's something that I don't think I could produce, at least not as quickly as they did. And the other side of that is, of course, they have a lot of communication within the WoW scene, where they were able to bring in all those people. Although the Twitch chat, of course, turned into a big Wong fest between, you know, the WoW players and Final Fantasy XIV players. And my favorite thing, and I said this before the show, but my favorite thing was when WoW players would come in and say, "Oh, look at all these weebs. This is a weeb game," and everything else. I'm like, so you're telling me this motherfucker plays WoW, but he doesn't watch anime? He doesn't like anything. He's just some boring asshole over here that just likes a cartoon MMO. Right?
Never watched a single anime in his entire life.
Yeah, he is not.
It's a prerequisite to playing WoW.
Yeah, it's so. It was so.
You watch your first anime, you're out of there.
You're out of it. You're a weeb. You're a weeb. You're horrible. You're cringy. You're weird. And so it was interesting to see that. But I mean, that's the communities. I didn't realize were so like separated in that way. And WoW had this whole perception against Final Fantasy XIV of negative light of them being super weebs and everything else. But it came out. It came out pretty clear.
You're playing a game with cat girls in it. Of course it's weeb.
Yeah, you got dancing, night elves. Is that not... I don't know. There's something... I do agree. We won't get into that. We won't get into the whole WoW versus Final Fantasy XIV, but that was what Twitch chat was. And I do think that the people who on Method side did a good job at trying to keep that tame and organized without going overboard. So I appreciate that too. And everyone I worked with, by the way, when I talked to them and when I was going through everything, they were great. They were awesome. The one thing I will say is that these guys are so fucking overloaded. They didn't give, obviously, the attention that was needed for this event.
Right. Just going back one sentence, when you talked to them, you said,
yeah,
they were great. They approached us, and we never talked to anyone from Method. We had no fucking clue what was going on the entire time in the lead up to it. They approached some person in the Final Fantasy community who then had to go and liaison with everyone else, and nobody had a clue what was going on.
So
their middleman started name dropping teams to us, and I went to those teams and asked them, and they're like, "We have no idea what you're talking about."
So let's
And
talk
that
about
bugged the
that.
hell out of
Let's
me.
talk about that a little bit.
Because
Oryza knows him personally, and I know him a lot more now. We all know who you're talking about. But go ahead, Oryza.
I mean, it's Kyo, but not your Kyo. He's also Kyo.
Yeah.
It's a little confusing. But he's Red Mage Kyo. So the story is actually he reached out to Method to see if we could do this for Ultimate, actually, for Alexander. And then it eventually just like fell through and didn't happen. But then apparently Method reached out to him for the Savage race, being like, oh, can we do this? And then he had, to my knowledge, he had to like reach out to all the teams, and like people are like, who are you? And it's just like,
yeah,
what is going on? Because like no one knows who he is. But like if like he did have like a contact with Method about it. I don't know much more than that though.
When the first question is this even legit?
Yeah,
you know there's a problem. If we had contact from actual Method people, like a Twitter DM or something like that, from someone involved in the production of it, that would have gone a really, really long way into sort of making it feel like an actual thing that we could discuss, as opposed to how are we supposed to plan for something that we don't even know is real.
Yeah, we had to ask somebody. We have
we had to ask
a friend.
Klops to ask Yoda, who was part of Method.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, oh yeah, it's real. Oh, okay.
I remember that. I asked him about that, yeah.
Yeah, that was us figuring it out. That was just like...
So, Method's going... Yeah, they're definitely trying to do this more like... It branch out and everything else, but they are woefully unaware of Final Fantasy XIV. They don't know much about it and the community and everything else. So Listoli was definitely their contact. And I think this... I'm going to be honest, this wouldn't have happened without Listoli at all. Who pushed pretty hard with Method to make it happen. He was communicating. It's been a long process before I ever got involved with it at all. But he's also not an event manager. No. You're muted. I think. Okay, no, I got you.
I won't say
it. Okay. He's not an event manager. He doesn't get paid to go run events and everything else. And so there's a lot of stuff that I've picked up over years at talking with people and understanding how to say things. So you don't say things that might seem assuming or say. I mean, he got a lot of heat for that. I'll be honest, but I will say that he put the work in to communicate with teams and actually made something happen. I'm not going to say that the way he said some things were correct, but he did actually push for it. And afterwards, after I found out it was legit, and I talked to Layla and everything else, and we actually found out what was going on, because I had the same question. Listoli messaged me. I was like, who the fuck is Listoli? So I didn't know, but we did find out it was legitimate, and we had a meeting with Method, one of the managers with it. It was Layla, Cleese, and myself, and we talked about it. And then we both agreed this seems like a legitimate thing that we could try to make happen. We didn't know, of course, everything that would follow up afterwards, but we both agreed this is something we'd like to see happen, and we would try to make it happen. With all this being said, WoW also had its Race the World first right before ours. So they put all these resources into making this one event happen, plus they had this other PvP thing they were doing over the weekends and everything else. And so they didn't really have anyone officially that was an event manager to run this from a Final Fantasy XIV perspective. They had themselves who were very unaware of the event, and they had Listoli, who was kind of their point of contact. After a while, I kind of started to realize this. I started trying to fill in every single little hole that I could, and we made it happen. The communication, of course, was pretty subpar going into it, and I can't really put the blame. It was more of they wanted to do it, but didn't have what they really needed. Yeah, the communication, networking, the involvement, and everything else that they would really need to make it happen. And if I was involved way beforehand and I knew that was the situation, I think that it would have turned out to be a little bit different. And the players, this is one of the bad parts, and I'm saying this like I'm going to piss off a lot of people probably at some point. The players, you guys didn't know you weren't just streaming to your own stream until the day of, right?
Yeah, so I actually wanted to bring that up.
So go ahead, yeah.
I think despite Method being busy and stuff, like there's a lot of stuff as like one of the people who streamed to Method where just like everything felt super last minute. It felt extremely disorganized. I was like, this is like not if they understand Final Fantasy 14 or not question. This is just like an event, a streaming event question. It doesn't matter what game it is. It has nothing to do with the game.
That's true.
And that's a lot where a lot of my issues lied.
Yeah, and again, if I knew that was the case and other things need to be organized, I probably would have stepped in a lot sooner to start doing this and start saying, hey, we need to make sure, because I didn't talk to any of the players for a while. I was just like, all right, well, I know let's totally talk to some teams. That's okay. I'm just going to make sure the talent that we were bringing on was there, organized, everything was good with them. And for the most part, it was. There was a lot of stuff that we had to do, and really, I would go ahead.
What it really tells me is that if there was to be another event, it's going to be a hell of a lot better.
Absolutely.
Because all those kinks are going to be ironed out, and you already know the issues at which are going to be presented, and the people on the streaming end already know what they need to ask. Mm-hmm. And yeah, all those like issues that came up now can be properly addressed.
Yeah.
So if it does happen again, I'm excited for it. Mm-hmm. But I do not want a repeat of how it was handled this time.
Yeah, no, I don't either, because I didn't sleep for 2 to 3 days. But
yeah, exactly.
Go ahead. Or is this?
Yeah, it was like pretty bad, right? Like I think they didn't tell us that we couldn't stream to, or rather, like to stream to our own channel, you had to spend $20 on like this restream program, and they didn't tell us that until the day.
Well, okay, so I need to make that clear too. Is they didn't say you had to do that, right? They said that was an option to solve the situation. You should have had that expectation 100% that you had to provide a dedicated stream to Method. That should have been something that was declared, and before you even said yes, I'm going to do it.
Wait, so hold on. So Method said you had to pay $20.
No, they did not. I got to make that clear. They said there is a solution to that.
Before I go off on a tangent.
Yeah, that was a.
So
it sounds like
basically you had to stream directly to Method.
Oh
and
no, my streams died.
Channel,
I think
one of the options was to spend money on a program to do that. Another option was to run 2 instances of OBS.
I think my internet just failed. I guess we could go ahead and pick back up. I think the stream's back up. Hopefully people refresh if they need to. I don't know. But we were talking about, I was trying to explain that in the end, Method was not telling us to buy a $20 program to do it. It was just that was what was required in order for an easy way to do it. You could also do 2 OBSs, but I don't know if you guys have the computers that could manage 2 OBSs at the same time.
Not worth risking.
Considering you're probably already trying to optimize just to have one stream. Yeah.
So that
did you pay the $20? Because weren't you doing some sort of like charity stream at the same time?
Yeah.
So I paid it.
And Oryza
paying to Prague.
Yeah.
It was so dumb.
This is what we tried to combat with the team name Free to Play back in the day.
And so I'm going to say this, and I felt the worst about Oryza's situation because I know he was planning this and this was a build up for charity and everything else. And the fact that that came up last minute was really bad. And I'm going to let you know all these frustrations you guys are talking about has been relayed in a very aggressive manner. So they understand. They understand it for a good bit. I will also let you know this is probably the worst situation at all, and this is behind the scenes horrible stuff too. And eventually, and this is a good thing to let you guys as well have information about. They were allowing the talent to be compensated in some way for being on the stream. So there is that. I couldn't provide that myself. There is absolutely no way I would be able to pay people to be on there for that amount of time. And so that they were able to provide the stream and provide some compensation for the talent, that was astronomical compared to what I could do before. But going back, the very beginning of the stream, I think I tried to mess up my sleep schedule the day before, but that way I could get sleep right before the event happened, but I didn't go to sleep before the event.
You can't.
Yeah, it didn't really
Sleep
work.
prep for Prague is not a one-day thing.
It's hard.
It's awful. It was actually really bad for the stream too, because so on Monday, they wanted to have a thing on Monday at 10 a.m. for all the streamers to get together and like test the streams, but then like they just kind of didn't give us our stream keys like to stream to Method, and then like we were just waiting, and then eventually Keo told me, he was like, oh yeah, I think we can just go to bed now, and I was like, can we or can we not? Like I'm so confused. And then like eventually it's just like screw it, I'm just going to sleep. And then we ended up having to test, like they're like, yeah, we want you awake 2 hours before to like test the stream, and I was like, well, I was planning to sleep longer, but whatever. Yeah. Like
this was
there's a lot of last minute.
Most of it was done last minute, and I know their side of the team, there's people who are streaming and making it all happen, were overly pressured to kind of do all this last minute stuff too, because they had all these other things to do. The core organization of this event didn't give enough attention and I don't want to say respect. I want to say enough reason to put the forces into making it successful happen beforehand. They didn't have someone like an event manager to make this stuff clear and covered beforehand. That should change if it happens again. That is absolutely 100% of a requirement, is that someone would actually plan this event out properly with a lot of time, and all the players knew exactly what was going on. Go ahead.
Debbie just brought this up, and I just remembered. On the last day, I had to bring Haru into voice chat and try to talk to him in Japanese to help the method people help him set up his stream. Like, it was so awful. I was like, why do I? This is like, I don't know.
I felt really horrible that was the situation too.
Yeah, just another point for how like unorganized it was.
It was rough, and I'm gonna go ahead and give because this was happening. I said I was not going to update the Final Fantasy XIV progress website because I just wouldn't have time to focus on it and do it. And then about an hour before the stream started, they showed me a pull from that website of the leaderboard that they were going to put on the stream. So I didn't know they were going to reference the leaderboard from a website I wasn't planning to update and wasn't ready at all. So within the last hour of the show, I tried to make that website work and fix it. And during the first 8 hours, I was kind of reprogramming a website while commentating.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So
I remember that coming up, and there was like an issue where like the times were in ascending order instead of descending, and it's like,
and I couldn't get the sequel to work with it and everything else the way I wanted it to. And this was all stuff that was going in my head while talking about what was on the stream. And so
I do not envy you.
These are things, again, that I brought up and Method understands. And I think if they come forward with this again, they have to take it more seriously. And I believe they will, or we aren't going to be a part of it. And I think that's kind of the thing. The other part is, hey, would we even, after this event, want to include Method again? Are we saying, oh, never? To me, that's not really something that I'm going to declare, because it's 6 months. And if they come forward in a few months and they're like, hey, let's take this seriously, this is all the stuff we're going to do, and plan it out and make it serious, they could probably still provide a really good event that could have a lot of benefits outside of what we could do at homegrown. The other option is, if that doesn't happen, then we're just doing it homegrown.
Do you have like the channels in which you can give this feedback available to you? Because that would be
I already gave it.
Best thing. You have? Okay.
I gave all this.
That's important.
Everything that you guys have complained about, every little detail I have. And again, I've done this really, really aggressively. This guy who actually did a really great job with handling the stream, but was a little bit unrealistic with the leaderboard and everything else that I was just complaining about. As soon as I got back from trying to fix it, while other people were on stream, not on stream, but other people were in the channel, not expecting me to come in full rage, I came in and I was telling the guy to fuck himself, basically, before the stream started. I was really, really rough. And so they understand. They do. And I think that if this comes forward again, it will be a different situation. But that being said, I want to go ahead and make sure I highlight everyone who came on as talent was fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Our community has some really unappreciated members who could do some really good work. For example, Layla. Well, I kind of expected Layla to do really good, but he did absolutely phenomenal. So did Cleese. Cleese carried me a lot of times when I was focused in other directions during the event, because it was just me and Cleese. I had 8 hours alone with Cleese, just me and him.
Oh, it's dream date.
It was great. And I mean, Fold came in and he didn't say a lot of crazy, horrible things during the stream. He was like super professional. I also want to say that Solitary did a great job coming on, and this was definitely his first time doing it. It was a lot of people's first time doing it. He came on, and once he got talking, it was pretty good, man. I really appreciate him being there. One of my biggest highlights, though, was the fact that we had someone who was invested in the lore community and not even part of the world race, who was a god at hosting. This was amazing.
Didn't Method think that Cleese was Ethos?
I think there was some confusion with all that went.
Yeah. So they approached Cleese thinking he was Ethos.
I think there was some sort of confusion with that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But that being said, that did get worked out in the end. But at this came on, you heard the whole thing, Sfia. I mean, he had one of the most interesting roles of the stream, I think, talking about lore and bringing all this stuff to give us kind of a refreshing point of view versus just a regular lore talk. So
yeah, definitely had some color to it. It was really good.
Yeah,
a good mix up.
Yeah. So I want to make sure that's highlighted out of all this too, and also the teams. Again, we're very lucky that Horo's team went to sleep way before all the other teams, and that kind of worked out because we weren't expecting 2-day prog either. And so after like 20 hours, we're like, holy shit. We have to sit there and reschedule and see who could be available and what we could do. And so we're doing last minute kind of adjustments on the back end to make sure we have people to talk during every hour of this event continuing on. And so this event almost doubled what it was supposed to be in length. And no one was prepared. None of the streamers, no one else was ready to do it. And that was a kind of understandable situation because who knew Square Enix would make a 2-day boss again for Savage?
Just makes me wonder what the next tier is going to be. Are they going to push 2 days? Are they going to push 3?
I don't know.
Could be.
Yeah.
I mean, they've made it very clear that they want to ramp up the difficulty of Savage tiers throughout the expansion. Mm-hmm. So, what's the next step up from that in a Savage tier is what we got to ask ourselves.
Yeah. But all this, of course, being said, I really appreciate Method coming into the community and actually rallying us up because honestly, I would have just done the same thing I do every single tier. And that would have been just kind of keeping with the spreadsheet, being half awake, just kind of not really thinking or paying attention, trying to just watch Twitter and all the streams and everything else and update and try to keep people in a loop. And I think that this has sparked enough interest in me to want this to happen every single tier. I don't know about Ultimate because I don't see how that logistically, maybe we could make that happen, but man, that's rough to do 1 to 2 weeks of talking for one fight.
You'd need more people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You'd need to sleep.
Yeah. I would need to sleep. So I'm glad that this has happened, and I'm glad to see what this outlook is for the future of World First Racing, because I think this is a good point for where it's going to start growing again. Now, this was a lot of me talking after everything went down. I wanted to make sure I just emphasized a few points. I would like to hear a little bit more perspective from your guys' end, since you guys watched it. I haven't watched I think I watched 10 minutes of the stream, to be honest with you, because I just didn't have time to go back and review everything.
I watched all of it, and I mean, it was good. We've already talked about the problems with it.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
But outside of the issues we've talked about, I mean, it was a well-produced, well-managed stream.
One thing that I did notice when I went back and watched it a lot was I was not super involved with a lot of the actual production, but it seemed like somebody from Method was in control of like switching the screens and stuff, like what we could see. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of times where the commentators were like, if we could get a look at, you know, this perspective, because this important thing is happening. And then we just kind of sit there for a little bit. And it creates a little bit of an awkward situation, both for the commentators and the audience, that there's not really, and I mean,
and also because the person in control of the stream isn't familiar with Final Fantasy, he doesn't know what to look for. If you've got a pull that's going deep into a fight, he isn't aware of that. So having the control of what's being shown on stream in the hands of a person who's actually commentating on it would probably be better. But I can understand why they didn't want to give that control away for the first time.
Well, no, it's not like, and it wasn't just something like being able to give that control or not wanting to. Is more of like,
yeah, I assume it was a technical thing.
Yeah, they had one stream up and one person controlling the stream, and I will say the people who were doing it definitely start to learn to pick up these things. Yeah. And try to balance it all out. It was a growing pain to kind of get adjusted to. But I will say, absolutely, I don't know. It would be nice to have someone who was very familiar with Final Fantasy XIV that moved the scenes around and everything else. But the idea was, hey, we call it out and they can do it. But they're sitting there for 8 hours listening to us for a direction. So there's going to be times where they don't hear it, and so I have to give them that,
I mean,
that benefit.
it's one of those things that's unavoidable, both in the fact that they don't really know what to look for themselves, and like you said, they're kind of relying on prompting. I mean, it definitely was just like a few moments here and there.
It was just like never go. There was a lot of times where we called to move it, and as soon as we moved the camera over, you guys wiped, and I was like, all right, let's go back. And so it's tough. It was a lot of stuff that we had to learn on our end, because we have no experience with doing these events either, and so we had to learn a lot of stuff on our end.
Yeah, but overall, I mean, it's already been stated, but yeah, the commentators super carried that stream. Yeah. It was really interesting to listen to perspectives, both from people, inside of the hardcore scene, people who didn't really hardcore raid from a lore perspective. And it gave people a lot of kind of centralized information that you don't really get from just like, oh, I've got these 3 streams of these 3 different groups. I don't really know what I'm looking for or what they're doing. It's a super helpful resource for people that aren't necessarily in the scene, whether it's Final Fantasy or just in the hardcore raid scene at all.
So for us, though, all being really deep into the community, this is a major event, and it's really important to us. And they just came into an unfamiliar event they didn't really know much about, and that's really what it was. And if it was different, and we had myself knowing that I was going to turn into some sort of person who was trying to help with a lot of stuff, then it would have been different as well. But I feel like I can see it happening no matter what, whether method's involved, whether method's not involved, no matter what. I can see this happening again. And that being said, I do have a question. Do you feel like if this starts to become a more regular thing, that the raid scene would start to kind of open up and want to be a part of this? Or would we still stay kind of where we are, where, for example, Sfia, you guys, logistically, it makes sense not to stream. Would that change if you guys start to get sponsors, if you guys start to get people who are more involved with it?
We've discussed it. It's always been part of the discussion. It's just like this example in particular of what we just had, it was nowhere near organized enough for us to be able to say, yes, we want to do this. Maybe in another world where, everything was properly communicated and things were on the right track in terms of communicating with us, and the systems were in place to begin with, then maybe that could have been pursued. But it's also like some of it just want a game.
Yeah,
we don't really care about the stream. That's obviously not all of us. I mean, I stream all the time, but some of us just aren't interested in that at all, and that's fine. As soon as one person doesn't want to, that's just the way that the team will function.
Well, I know that when we were going into this and we were having the discussions for it, there was the obvious whole how streaming in 14 gives you a disadvantage because it's just a knowledge game and everything, and you're giving up that knowledge in terms of like the world race and everything. Plus, people generally play worse when they're being watched.
Right.
And we don't want that either. But if I'm being honest with you, Frosty, if you were to just do out and do this yourself, we probably would have been more likely to do it. Because I'll say, like, when the stream went down, what I told everyone else is that I am not a fan of an esports organization, a group, a business with money coming in and saying, do this for exposure for us.
Yeah.
And I'm just
we're gonna make money from you.
Yeah, I'm like, no, fuck off. I told him to send. I told Keo to send back the forexposure.txt Twitter account to them. Which never made it back to them, unfortunately. But I am very heavily against
someone profiting off of people and they not profiting themselves.
Yeah. Like, if we just did it all in-house and everything, perfectly fine with that. That would have been great. But if they're going to be doing this to make money and profit, no.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think they made any money off of this.
Who cares? It's a company. They put their logos on screen. They don't even do 14. They do WoW and other stuff. They want to come in and do this. They got to put in the investment to make it work. That's how an investment happens.
So go ahead, Oryza.
I very strongly agree with Sindalf, actually. So I did it because I was like, I'm running this charity thing. It's good exposure, but I was very on the fence for a really long time about whether I wanted to do this or not for a similar reason. Because I was like, I had asked Keo that the Lastoli Kilo, the middleman, and I was like, are we getting paid? And they're like, No, but maybe we'll like sponsor a group for next tier for Ultimate.
Yeah.
If you do well, and it's just like that feels really weird, and like I that's like I don't really care about that. Like
they dangle that carrot in front of every single team. They're like, oh, they'll probably sign a team to Method for next Ultimate or something. We're just like, you're gonna say that to 50 teams and then make them like it's like the people standing around the monkeys fighting, you know? It's essentially what it was.
And if you look at like people who currently play for Method and you read their Twitters and everything else, the word contract is thrown around a lot, where you actually have to go in, sign some papers, get that whole stuff figured out. No person who's sitting in their room right now just playing games is ready for that sort of like commitment problems that can come with that. Because at the end of the day, I think that to me, that says they own your team. They're the ones who make the decisions on what's about to happen.
You're making big assumptions about what they would want to do in a contract and the way that it would function. I can understand why you're concerned about it. Yeah,
sure.
So
I am making big assumptions.
Yeah. Well, I will say it is definitely odd from the player's point of view, because you're like, what's the real advantage to it? Because the community right now also doesn't really profit from streaming prog. Most of the hardcore world racing scene is done off stream, so there's no profit already, and so being offered to do something without profit still, but helping someone else profit does feel awkward.
If we were to stream, if we were to join in the streaming event, it would be nothing but negative effects for our team. We would potentially play worse. We would give away strats, which is directly hinders our chance of winning, and we get exposure in return, which none of us really care about.
Yeah.
So that was essentially what it came down to. We'd give a lot and get zero in return.
Yeah.
And we care about winning, right? And essentially that's what it came down to.
I mean, and I thought about, there's a couple different ways to handle this, because people do talk about money coming into the Final Fantasy XIV racing scene, and they're like, well, that kind of ruins it for them, right? Because then you have people even really more cutthroat with doing the third-party programs, really more cutthroat with doing all the other stuff to make sure they win in the end. And so...
Looking at you, Entropy.
And so...
I'll name names.
Where is Entropy at? I didn't even know they existed this tier.
Yeah, the money dried up.
Oh, okay. Okay. But people start to worry about that, and they're like, well, that kind of ruins it for me, right? I'm not really as excited for it anymore. But I feel like if it could somehow be involved in some form or fashion, it could help grow the scene. It just has to be done right. For example, one thing that I was thinking about is like, if you're going to have a whole bunch of people wanting to stream and offer you their perspective. Oh, Jesus Christ. You're good.
That was really loud.
That was almost like a Zeppy beginning to the show. I guess we didn't get that this time, did we? With the scrolling Star Wars at the beginning of the show. Oh, well. I guess we missed out on that. But that being said, if we offered like a small reward for the first team to clear that was on stream, that could maybe be something. But not like huge rewards. They would always have to be like small rewards, unless if people were getting sponsored and everything else. But
even then, there was... So what I noticed on Twitter, it's like, okay, so this was called the Race the World First. But not racing, by the way.
Well, I mean, that's just how it is. How are we going to get people to come on stream and say we're racing for world first when they're streaming?
It really doesn't matter, personally.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Whether or not you are, as long as you end up somewhere high enough on the bracket to be worth watching in this specific context. But it's like, I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, it was
a good Twitter day.
It's a good Twitter day. Because, I mean, that's going to be a tough growing pain, is having people come on stream and then having to say, hey, because that was a lot of people's concern. They're like, I don't want to come on a world first stream when don't want to tell people I'm racing, because that puts an appearance of pressure that I don't feel like we should have. We're just trying to clear as fast as we can, which is legitimate. But, it's also... it does mean that we lose a point of view of someone who would clear really quick, because even though they're not racing, they're a contender for being one of the first teams to clear. So we won't get into the whole conversation, because Jesus Christ. That's
a lot I could say, but no one wants to hear it.
But I do hope that this could be something more positive going forward. Method, the shortfalls would be the kind of lack of planning and everything else, and my sleep that I lost a few other things that went on with the event. But it does mean positive things, I think, going forward for the community. And hopefully, I mean, we have 6 months to prep for the next World First race, right? So hopefully that means that's going to be a lot better going into the next one. Oh, how do you guys feel about that? No Ultimate next patch.
Well, this is going to be a boring 6 months.
They're
It's a
putting
lot of games.
BA2, right?
Sure.
That's what they're
Is that
doing.
what did they declare that? I actually didn't see the
I'm
news.
pretty sure that they've said that.
Okay,
yeah.
BA is fun.
BA is
BA
fun.
is
It's
fun.
also it is essentially a prog experience as well, which is what we want. Whether it's an ultimate or a savage tier, I'm pretty sure I speak for everyone here when we want blind prog learning experiences. That's what we do it for. So essentially, it's the same thing, but it's just on a different format. So I'm excited for it.
X up at the Radiance house for BA.
Yeah.
I'll take time off for that.
Radiance.
BA is just like BA is such a different experience. This
It's a
game's
really
like,
good
yes,
time.
it's easy, it's not that hard, but the extra pressure of only having one life and a bunch of other aspects that you had to figure out, like the teleports, going through absolute virtue, and how you only got a shot at it once every few hours, adds an extra level of pressure that you don't normally feel.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it was very enjoyable, even though it's very easy content, but it felt real.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of fun doing it.
It was a legitimate prog experience.
Yep, and that would be awesome to cover as well on a stream. Just you can't plan for that. There's no way to plan. You think missing
you're gonna
one
have-
day on this was different, and you have literally no clue what's going into some content with BA sometimes.
I mean,
Not only
more
that,
like-
but you'd be able to cast one pull every like 3 hours.
Yeah, and realistically, you'd only be able to watch like NA and then JP because it's what 56 people.
Yeah, and so
Something
it'd be
like that.
data center by data center, right? You'd be like, oh, here's this data center, and then there's it's because there's no 56-man groups out there when we're used to an 8-man group. So
And hopefully, we don't have to go through instant sniping.
Hmm.
But I doubt we will. Where everyone has to just queue in the Eureka.
yeah. All right. Yeah, I wanted to get all that stuff out with the method stream and everything to really discuss that a bit because I felt like it was definitely worth talking about. It was something to be excited for, and there were things that we need to be open and honest about and not just say, oh, it was hunky-dory, because I'm not. I might you can watch maybe when it's time for my check to come in, it never comes in, right? My little tiny talent check. But who cares at this point? I want to make sure you guys know exactly kind of how the situation is, because when it comes to the world race, it's what I'm involved with. It's very important to me. It's been a huge part of me with Final Fantasy XIV, and I got to make sure that it's something positive for the community, I guess, if that makes any sense. All right. So what else do we have here? I didn't even look at the thing.
We're about halfway through our outline.
About halfway through. Okay. All right. Let's see. Are you guys gonna keep your groups together for 6 months for the next race? I guess that was one question I had on there.
No,
Probably.
Sindalf's been kicked.
Okay.
Oh, what?
I could be kicked. Who knows?
I mean, if anyone's getting kicked, it's me. I feel I played so fucking bad, man.
But you're the one who figured out
Yeah.
the cat's heart, dude.
Maybe.
Not really. I'm the one who wiped us in the pool that we got the information from. So
Yeah. You're the catalyst.
something like
I
that.
think our team's generally going to stay together. Although realistically, if we don't
6 months is a long time.
Yeah, 6 months is a long time. I know some people in the group have plans coming up, like vacations and other things. And if things start conflicting with that, we may have no choice but to replace somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
And
think anyone wants to change up the roster.
they
Okay.
don't want to right now. If we don't perform next year, who knows?
Maybe you'll start thinking about it.
Yeah, we'll start thinking about it then.
If Tuls gets a girlfriend, do you think he'll be around for your next prog cycle?
No, dude, he's getting girlfriend, quitting immediately.
As soon as he
Never
gets a
gonna play
girlfriend, it's done.
anymore.
We all
Alright.
accept this, yeah.
And you just disband the group and you have to remake another one?
We've lost our purpose once that happens. So,
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough.
but our scholar is actually moving to Japan, so we actually have to find somebody to replace him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then like, yeah, 6 months is a long time. You never know what's going to happen with a group. Like my eating group was together, and then like 2 weeks before prog started, 2 people quit, and it was just like, oh, okay, gotta find new people. Like, I mean, it happens. Like, Animal Crossing comes out in 3 weeks. Maybe I'll just quit this game forever and just play.
Like, yeah, Animal Crossing Pro. Yeah,
you never know.
Yeah, doesn't Doom come out around the same time too?
Same day.
Same day.
Yeah.
Fuck. All right, got to make a choice there, I guess.
Both at the
Animal
same time.
Crossing, dude.
Both at the same time. Animal Crossing and just kind of all right.
Just dual wielding controllers.
Fair. And foot pedals.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's see. What else do we got here? I think we hit most of it. I'm sorry the stream disconnected. I felt like that was horrible timing for the conversation and everything else. But I feel like we hit most of these points that I had listed out. Was there anything that we missed here before we start going into like viewer questions, which I guess we have that too?
Let's go through the list.
Yeah,
Go through the
playing
list.
PSO2 instead of Ultimate 5.3.
Oh yeah, let's play. I'm down.
Oh, yeah.
geez. There's no Ultimate 5.3 though, so I mean.
I'm trying to get everybody from 14 on the same ship. For,
Same ship.
When that comes out, and then we can all just have fun and play together.
I'm gonna let you know that PSO Fantasy Star Online was one of my favorite games when it was on the Dreamcast, and it was a wonderful experience for me. But I have never played or had the interest in PSO2 because it never came to the US and it was too much of a hassle to play it. And now it's just an old game. So why would I get into it?
I played on JP with some friends for a bit. It's a little different than the original, but it's still fun. It's still an enjoyable game, so you'll probably like it, especially if you get to play games with friends, because everything's fun with friends.
Okay.
Except for raiding.
Fair enough. All right, so here's some questions to go on. One, and you know what? I probably should do a giveaway here too, but I'm gonna ask this question first. We had a question to ask: what was the comfiest tank to prog on for this tier?
It's always Dark Knight because it's very easy to play except for 10-minute windows. But unfortunately, mitigation didn't really matter much this tier. Like, you can even look at the world first Dark Knight. It does like 3 TBNs in the second half of Shiva.
I feel like outgoing damage in this tier was very low.
It definitely was. TBN didn't shine as much as it would have normally. You could have played any tank and it would have worked out, but Dark Knight's just slower than everybody else until you have to go into your opener/burst window, and then you just don't have to think. Like, for a good 50 seconds at a time, your brain does not work. And then for 10 seconds, your brain's in overdrive. And then it goes back to not thinking.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
Man, I played Paladin in the final coil of Ultimate, or not Ultimate, final coil of Bahamut.
I did too.
Just good days, man. 1, 2, 3,
1, 2,
just
3.
1, 2, 3.
That's kind of what it's like going back to that.
Yeah.
Except every 10 seconds you have buttons to press.
It's true.
But no, I played both. I played a bit of Warrior already too, and honestly, it could barely tell the difference between them. It's just, I mean, I know Warrior and Dark Knight are like the easiest tanks to play out of the 4 of them, but it's just there's not enough going on to make them seem worthwhile in picking one over another. Like, even the tank busters alone, they feel like filler.
Yeah, it doesn't test the strengths of any tank at all, this whole tier.
Yeah.
There's none of them where you're like, oh, cover is really sick here, or, brings out the value in TBN, or anything that Flash feels particularly valuable for. It's all kind of samey.
Not even Dark Missionary felt useful. I mean, it is useful, but it's like it didn't impact hard enough.
So, I'm gonna ask this as a follow-up question to this real quick because I want to make sure I don't forget to ask this. Sfia, how do you feel about the world first having Red Mage in their party?
People think that I think Red Mage is trash. I just dislike the gameplay. It's so fucking boring. That's why I dislike it. And also being forced onto that job because of its shitty balance in Stormblood. That's why I dislike it.
Okay.
Good on them for playing Red Mage. I'm glad that they can have fun with it. I can't. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in order to spice up the rest of the tier, I'm gonna probably play Gunbreaker.
Okay. Do it.
Get that extra 200 DPS.
You might as well stream too at that point, right?
Nobody wants to watch me play this game. They're gonna I'm going to out myself for the fraud that I actually am.
Oh, jeez. Well, yeah. Anyways, all right. Guys, think of a giveaway statement for me. What do I need to do? What command is the giveaway statement for today?
Tuls.
Tuls?
Yeah.
Everybody? Is that it?
Sure.
I hear no rejections.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
All right. So here we go. This is for a $25 Mog Station item, and I'll get with you after the show at some point. You may have to email me if Twitch doesn't work. Either way, we'll get in touch. And I'm going to do it for Tuls, and I haven't even started it yet. You guys are just pulling the trigger, man.
Good command. If you're ever in Ori's chat, be sure to drop an exclamation point Tuls.
By the way, there's no exclamation. There's no exclamation point in this one. You have to do it without the exclamation point.
Oh.
There you go. Type in.
I feel like how people that are in the show enter the giveaway.
Of course, you guys are all welcome here. You know, worst case scenario, you may win a giveaway.
We don't win, it's rigged. If we win, it's also rigged.
Yeah.
So.
It's always rigged. There's never a time that it's not rigged. I look at the name and I choose who I want to win. All right, let's ask this other question. Let's see. Is it true that long exposure to Sindalf causes you to post cropped it porn on Twitter?
It's a good tweet. All right. I was very proud of it.
I was proud of it too.
Yeah.
What the hell, man?
There's source in the thread, by the way, if you're interested in that.
Okay. So just to let you know, I do have to unfollow so many people after the world race.
Unfollow me.
Did I? I think I did.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't follow me.
I'm sorry, Sindalf, man.
I'm okay with it.
I am at work,
and
I look at Twitter at work from time to time, and just them seeing Twitter on the phone would be like, you know, hey, that's kind of weird. But if they look at Twitter and they see, like, breast or someone getting fucked on my phone, that would be a lot worse than them just seeing Twitter. So, I'm sorry, man. It's just,
All right.
It is what it is.
It's okay. When I look at Twitter at work, I cover my phone to make sure no one can look.
Do you do this? You just...
Yeah.
Like, okay.
I do that. I have like a flip thing for it too.
Do you?
So I like cover it like half open.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Are you posting these things while at work?
Every so often I make a degenerate post while at work.
Oh, dear God.
I get bored.
All right. Let's ask this next question. Guys, remember, type in Tuls in the chat if you want to win a $25 Mog Station item or a chance at it. All right. Hi, guys. How do y'all feel about mini enrages just being a boss spamming AoE damage? What ideas do you all have to make enrage more interesting instead of just a heal check?
All right, check this out. The boss casts its enrage at the start of the fight, and you see it coming in the entire fight. Like the Dalamud in Ruby Weapon, you watch it coming in. Imagine that, but that's the enrage, and it casts at the start of the fight. And when Dalamud hits, that's the enrage going off.
That's actually perfect. I don't see
really fucking cool.
Any reason why not to do it, because that also gives you a pace during the fight, like a timer of sorts, right? Without actually having a timer, you have a gauge to follow, and you can say the boss is at this % at this gauge, and maybe that would be...
I'd like to see something like that, plus maybe mechanics that could extend the enrage timer.
Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, just like some sort of mechanic that could extend the rage timer, or maybe something better for Shiva would have been everybody gets stunned, and then Shiva just auto attacks everyone to death. At least at that point.
Why was it not Diamond Dust? Why was it Mirror Mirror?
At least at this point, Dot's gonna kill the boss.
Yeah.
My favorite enrage is actually Cruise Chasers still, because when you mess up mechanics, he enrages faster. There's basically no other fights that do that except Ultima. Ultima's is pretty good, but yeah.
Okay.
Ultima, you can actually do the mechanics differently and get more time, which I really like. Because I know in our kill we fed one person to every ball. So what ended up happening was it was like the window we had was so small, but we had the maximum enrage time.
Before we do the giveaway, I'm going to ask another question that's not in the list yet, but I figured I'd go ahead and ask it. Sindalf, do you have a picture of your eyebrows being shaved off?
Yes.
Do you?
Can you permit me to post a link?
Yeah. Hold on. I swear to God, if you post something that's not what we're expecting,
It's okay.
All right.
Okay. I would never break the rules.
I'm telling you, Sindalf.
I would never break the rules.
Perfect. This is perfect. Is this actually you? I've never seen a picture of you.
Yes.
Do you know that Sindalf self-imposed this bet? Nobody was ever talking about any wager or bet. He's just like out of nowhere one day wakes up and says, "I'm going to shave my eyebrows if we lose." This came from his brain. He did it to himself. Nobody asked for it at all.
I was in the bathroom shaving, and I was just like, "Oh, you know what? Let's just do this to make it interesting, because if we lose, that will at least make it fun."
So I gotta ask you, do you go into an office?
Yes.
What does everyone, your coworkers and everyone else, feel about you walking in without any eyebrows?
So they all mentioned that not everyone noticed. Eventually, people did notice, and people come and talk to me about it because they heard I had to shave my eyebrows. Actually, yesterday, one of the company heads came up to me at the end of the day and said, "Oh, I heard you shaved your eyebrows because you lost at something." And he's like, "That's not good. That's not good. I hope you realize that failure is not tolerated." I'm like, I understand that.
Very good. I'm glad
Failure
that they're
is
supportive.
not tolerated.
Now you understand that. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Let's do this giveaway. Where's the button to press it? All right. So I have absolutely no clue who this is. They need to. They need to say they exist for me to be able to tell you that you won it.
43% emo?
Ask the question?
43% emo.
There.
All right, they exist. All right, get with me after the show. You may need to message me on Twitter if I can't get to you through Twitch. Sometimes the Twitch chat sucks and it doesn't work in whispers. So you may need to ping me on Twitter and we'll need to get together, or you need to email me and we'll figure it out from there. But we need, of course, I have to verify your 43% emo. But other than that, congratulations, $25 gifts, Mog Station item. So go ahead and figure out what you want, and then after the show later today, we'll figure that out for you. Let's ask this next question, guys. This is actually to me. Frosty, did you have any background analysts like prog teams to help feed you information from individual streams and track other groups? No, I just had the people who are my co-talent to, feed information every once in a while, say something's off or say we need to look at something, or chat themselves, talk to us. I did all the tracking for clears in the spreadsheet by getting it updated to the public form, but Miuni and Dude is Antonio, who was in chat a little bit while ago, actually updated a sheet behind everything, behind the scenes, that I would copy and paste into the public one. Because it breaks.
You had some pretty big prog brains co-hosting with you, which made it really easy. Like you had people like Cleese and Layla and Solitary.
Bro, hold on.
You had people who knew what they were looking at very, very well. So,
absolutely. We had
you didn't need people in the background feeding info. You had it.
Yeah, I had it. Solitary, Layla, Fold, and Cleese are all very good analysts, and they pretty much carry that for everyone else that was on the show. If myself, at this, Jess and Mistech, we all kind of got help from them. That's why they were there. I lined it up and scheduled this out so we would have the analysts.
Literally stole our ninth man.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I am of
the
the
belief
I
steal
that,
it?
yeah, we made all these mistakes, and they were mistakes that we made, and we fucked up.
Okay.
But if Method didn't show up and we actually had Cleese for this tier,
are you gonna make me feel bad about this?
Not a chance. We would have won. Absolutely.
Yeah,
100%.
I think so.
I didn't join into this event until both Layla, myself, and Cleese decided to do it. It wasn't me taking Cleese away. Cleese was part of the discussion that it was going to go forward. So, it's on Cleese himself. I'm not going to take that blame. I did not ask him to come on. He decided to come on. All right. Let's see. How do you feel being the best caster in the world? This is from angry Twitter person, Sfia.
That feels pretty great.
It's not true at all. I'm rubbish.
Okay. Let's see. How do you feel about NA requiring Ruby weapons to clear, but JP doesn't?
Didn't require it.
Didn't require it.
Does not require
We've talked about this. I talked about this at the start of the E8 discussion.
They're just trying
damage
to be
wasn't
cheeky.
our issue.
Yeah.
Ping advantage, what Lemon said.
Ping
At
advantage.
a disadvantage, and we still don't need it.
That was actually, and I'm gonna say this very appreciatively. Thank you for posting when you guys clear stuff. It means a lot to me because I can actually have some reference to track it, and it doesn't all come in at the last point. Because I know not all teams do that, and so it makes it difficult to track. For example, Silink and them, and they chose not to really do that, and that's completely their decision. It's always your decision too. So if you guys decide not to post it up there, I will not hold it against you.
Right, but what it does is it makes it really obvious just how fucking hard we threw.
Does
We
it?
threw real
Feels
hard.
bad, man.
Yeah.
Same.
I have to live with this.
I'm sorry. Next time we do this, I'll make sure Cleese is not able to join the event. He's banned. He did a really good job, but he didn't do a good enough job for our team. You know what? Maybe that's the thing. If you guys let us show your stream, I'll give you Cleese.
I like how it's like a
We'll
commodity now.
We'll talk about
Follow
it.
the money.
Okay. Oh yeah, I didn't get to finish up this point. If we did decide to do something for the teams that were coming on, like, if you're streaming and you win on stream, you get like $1,000 split between the team. Would that be enough of a initiative to make teams want to be on there? Because it's really not a lot of money, but it's split 8 ways, right?
If it was method, I'd say it would probably need like a monetary incentive. If it was a more Final Fantasy community-based thing, we wouldn't probably need that.
So I guess here's a good point. What if the event was done and literally it was just a charity event? No one got any money out of anything. Every single bit, every single sub, every single everything just went straight to a charity.
Again, it comes down to whether my team feels comfortable with it or not. So that the answer would still be the same. Depending on how people feel.
Gotcha.
So I can't say yes or no based on if it's a charity event or whether Method's paying us or whether you're
I'm going to keep
paying us
pressuring you, or we're on stream here. We're just going to keep going and keep doing it. No, I'm trying to make you say that TPS hates charity on stream here.
That was actually kind
gamers,
of
we
my...
hate charity, minorities, and women, obviously. Yeah.
All right. So what were you saying?
I mean, one of my ideas was the charity thing. I was like, if like before we knew, I was playing this before we even knew about Method. So I was like, okay, in the future, if like I'm gonna keep doing this, then I would like talk to other people about like making it a bigger event. And then Method showed up, and then I was like, okay, well,
maybe that's what needs to happen. And again, we'll figure this stuff out later. We got 6 months to kick back and relax.
Yep.
Not me. I'm taking 7 classes while working a full-time job. So I'll have some time to do stuff, but right after the show, I'm going to compile this video and just do schoolwork until Monday rolls around and I go back and
Have fun.
Yeah.
Glad to be graduated.
I'm close, man. I'm getting there. But that all being said, I feel like we went over pretty much every single point, and we hit a lot of these questions. I could ask this other one about Deon and Trick Attack during Blind Prog. It says, all right, I have a question for Deon about Trick Attack in this Blind Prog. Normally I get nervous about Trick Attack when raiding, and that's literally the statement.
I'm always nervous about Trick Attack because if I missed it, I'm going to get yelled at. So.
Is that it? Or
that's not true. That's not true.
I mean, if we want an actual answer, I mean, you more or less just hit it on cooldown. When you play ninja enough, that becomes second nature anyway. So
yeah.
A lot of people think the ninja is the team cuck. I'd say it's the other way around. The
team?
The ninja is the commander. Everyone listens to the ninja. When the ninja presses buttons, you press your buttons.
Did Fold teach you that?
I don't know what
No,
Fold's opinion
Sindalf
was.
just doesn't know how to do his rotation without a light up orange button.
Apparently the rest of us don't either. We can see what we want about the DPS check. Yeah, we didn't need the weapons, but you can see our buffs desync from each other so hard without trick.
No.
Like there's a 7-second difference between chain going up and dance buffs going up.
Listen, I don't have to interact with any of those. So
I do.
it sounds like a you problem.
It is a me problem, but that makes it an us problem.
It won't be if you're not in the group next to you, but
Yes,
That
it's
is true.
anyway.
But you can't find anybody else, Sfia. Try.
Damn. All right. I get
the DMs now.
All right, I guess we can start. We've been going at this for 3 hours. I guess it's a good time to wrap it up and start getting towards the ending part. I do have one final question for all of you guys. Sometimes Square Enix does pay attention to translations from this show and everything else, and so I want to make sure to make this a point. If you guys are going to talk directly to Square Enix and say something to them, each one of you guys have a chance to say something that maybe they'll read. I don't know. And I don't know if I should start with Sindalf or not include him. But
You make me last.
I'll make Sindalf last here. Okay. Sfia, I'm gonna make you first then, if you don't mind. Go ahead and saying something, whatever you want to say to Square Enix about this tier and the World Race or anything else.
About the tier, I think it's, and I say this virtually every tier, but it's a step in the right direction. I feel like ever since Creator and then what happened with Stormblood rating, it really set a bad tone for Savage tiers specifically. Anything that isn't Stormblood Savage, I'm always happy for. So, like, this tier was amazing. It was my favorite since Midas, especially the last fight. So, I mean, I don't know who worked on these fights because it's still kind of a mystery, but they've done a really good job.
Would you say make it public who worked on the last fight and maybe the first and second?
All of the fights,
Okay.
I think, are very unique.
So, all right.
One thing I will say is that look-away mechanics are not fun.
That's just because you're bad at them.
You know what?
They don't work well with this video game.
I just remembered a point that I forgot way earlier in the show. I'm going to bring it up and derail all this whole last question thing. How do you guys feel about Shiva casting the ice on the arena and literally no one needing to move at all? Like, it's just a bait to make you think that something needs to happen, but you guys just have to stand still during the last phase?
I hate slip and slide mechanics. I was so upset when we saw those in normal.
I love them. I'm on the opposite side of that. I think it's amazing. But having the real thing in there where she throws ice on the floor and you don't do anything. You don't have to do a mechanic.
I mean, you do eventually.
But the first one is just there. It's just to bait you, right? It's not like what...
Yeah, there's like ice, and then you only have to move for the mirror ice, not her ice.
Yeah.
It exists to make sure that you are pre-positioned.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's to punish you for not being out of position, or for being out of position before it happens. Yeah.
Okay.
If you moved on that one instead, what would happen then is you would be where your Akai bait would be safe. So the party would start moving into an unsafe position and you'd wipe the group.
Okay.
So that's
okay.
why it exists in my eyes.
I think the problem with that, though, is that one, you have time to move back, assuming you move early enough, but also there's still a few seconds after that first ice dissipates that you like. I actually stand behind the boss there to get positionals and then move like to our normal bait spot after the first ice goes away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In general, ice mechanics, I mean, I'm a melee, so it's kind of annoying if we have to move a whole lot and I have to do some like weird Shikuchi stuff to move without sliding, but overall, I don't really mind, I guess.
All right, done derailing. I just want to bring that up because it was in my mind and I didn't want to let go of it. All right, Oryza. Oryza. Why do you have to have such a fucking name, man? What's so difficult for me?
You have to have a name.
Why, dude? I don't know. Call me whatever you want. I don't care.
All right. What would you like to say to Square
Enix? This tier was really, really good. This is my favorite tier since I started playing the game. Shiva is one of my favorite bosses in the whole game. God, the background music to Phase 2 of Shiva is so good. It's so good that it doesn't like I don't get PTSD when I listen to it after raid's over. Like that's a really big deal. Like I still turn the music on when I do Shiva. That song, I don't know, for some reason it's incredible to me. But this year was just really good, and I hope they keep bringing fresh blood into the fight design team, because the new ideas I think really made a big difference. And unrelated, but I really hope they don't do an Omega Ultimate in the future, because I hate Omega.
So boring. You'd fight Omega like frog form, then you'd fight Omega MNF, and then you'd fight Final Omega. They all do the same mechanic anyway. Yeah, rubbish fight it would be.
I will put an extra note on that. Like we had to make sure it was emphasized to Method that music is a huge part of the raid tier, and that they had to make sure that there were streams with music in the background so people could listen to it while we were watching it. Because it's such music, the art, everything is so huge in Final Fantasy XIV compared to other MMOs. But we did make a point of that when we were working with them. All right, Deon, what's your words to Square Enix?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I echo everybody else in the fact that this raid tier was a good step in the right direction. I think if, unlike everyone else, if I wanted to give one point of constructive criticism, I think it's don't be afraid to go a little harder into the third fight. Like leave Leviathan and the birds, or whatever it's called. I was a little disappointed by, especially when you look back at a thing like a Halicarnassus and a Guardian and those kinds of fights. Stormblood raiding had its problems, obviously, but I just think coming from fight 2 into fight 3, it didn't really feel all that much. Like I didn't feel as big a step up as I think there should have been. So that's my one specific thing.
Omnidirectional giant off the map third turn for boss positioning.
Just don't be afraid to get a little more creative with the third fights is really my takeaway.
Okay. And they keep talking about how they want to make the third fight the dam. That's where they want to stop the flow of people getting into the fourth fight. But the difficulty definitely could go up, as well as just the creativity with mechanics and boss designs.
Yeah, it shouldn't be just a straightforward run to the last fight. It definitely should have a ramp up, and I think, you're right.
For Pugs, I feel like the second fight ends up being the wall.
It was absolutely for Voidwalker. Yeah.
And if I've been in a lot of Ifigruta Pugs, and that last phase is a big wall for them.
Do you think that in both tiers, the second and third fights should have been flipped?
I feel like
because Voidwalker had the potential for way better mechanics with its spell and waiting.
Yeah.
And Ifrit Garuda is mechanically probably more difficult to execute than anything in Idol of Darkness.
They would have had to make Voidwalker more a little more difficult in some areas.
Right, obviously. But they have a lot of room to play with those mechanics. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
No.
People have been saying that for a long time. Like even in Midas, people said that the second and third fight should have been swapped. And
did they?
I don't remember hearing that. Yeah.
No, there were a lot of people who said the robots were harder than Goblin Man. Goblin Tank.
Yeah. Yeah, I know people did say that.
There were people who said that, and I didn't actually agree with that statement, but I remember hearing quite a lot about that. People were like, "Oh, SE messed up. They switched around the fights wrong." I'm wondering if they actually designed the fights then decide where they should go.
They did that with the first Eden. They talked about that they weren't sure the order of the fights, so they tried to make the mechanics as open-ended as they could, so that they could be tuned very easily for a difficult or an easy fight. But obviously we don't know much about their philosophy going into this tier, because we don't even know who did it.
Not yet. Not yet.
I will say that Shiva felt like a Kenji Pseudo fight.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was definitely
felt like good content.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Sindalf, what's your words to Square Enix here?
Yeah, so I think the tier is pretty good. Square Enix made some good fights. Like even the fights that I really didn't like, which was Ramu and to some extent the third one, it's still enjoyable. It's not like that's just my own personal preference and everything, but I'd say they really hit it with the second fight. just make that a little harder in the future, and it's going to be real nice, something that groups actually really enjoy going into every week. That isn't going to get completely outgeared eventually, and keep doing things like Shiva, where the mechanics don't repeat at the end, and we end up just constantly seeing new things. We're always on our toes because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that DPS checks coming back and actually mattering. That's nice in some ways because I've never actually had to try harder for a DPS check other than that fight right there. And to some degree Titan, but the instances were bugged. So I actually had to try harder on that fight than any other fight in the past.
Okay. All right.
So I had
also no passer hurt this tier a lot.
Yeah.
Well, hurt E8.
Yeah, don't break ACT.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of
break ACT, just don't break the DPS functionality. Everything else can go.
Unfortunately, I don't think it works that way. I don't think you can just selectively break it.
Yeah. And I guess if I'm going to throw in my own little bit, I usually don't, but I'm going to throw in one little bit. Make it easier for me to verify that people have cleared a fight through Lodestone. Like, just put like an achievement that it's just forced on their profile saying at this time it was cleared, at this server time or something on there. It would be great.
As opposed to a date, yeah.
Opposed to just a date. I mean, I asked it before, and he said he was going to investigate it. Please, Yoshida, do it. If you can somehow make it go to the minute on the achievement, it would make my life easier.
They can probably do it pretty easily. They just actually have to do time zone conversions in their code, which is actually just
even if they just stamp a time zone that's local to whatever it is. Yeah, just something I can decode.
Nobody can read UTC. Like UTC is not human readable.
All
I'm
right.
sure that's how they actually store it is UTC, but still.
Okay. Well, guys, we've been over 3 hours for this show. This has been a long one, and I appreciate all of your bits of energy after, a long prog. And I know I usually do it the weekend after. There's no way I could do it last weekend. So I appreciate you guys taking some time and then coming back after everything cooled down to discuss it a little bit with me. You guys have been absolutely, who timed out who?
Sindalf.
It was Sindalf. You should have
got
move on it.
Oh, jeez. But anyway,
every time.
You deserve it. You should have asked. That's all right. But yeah, I appreciate you guys coming on. It means a lot to me, and this is definitely something I'm very passionate about, and I think it's going to make lots of interesting development going forward in the future. Before we leave, of course, I also want to make sure you guys all have a moment to tell everybody who you are, and if they need to find you, ways that they can find you and talk to you if you want them to. You don't have to. So I'm going to start with Sindalf, which I don't think you should follow because I personally don't myself. But feel free, Sindalf, to go ahead and do your bit here.
You can find me on Twitter under the username Sindalf. It's where I use everywhere. Don't follow me if you don't like people liking random anime titties. Or non-titties, whatever. It's gonna pollute your timeline with 18+ stuff. So if you're into that, follow me. If you're not, or you just want to listen to my dumb takes from time to time, come on by.
Okay, all right. Do you stream at all, Sindalf, now?
I don't because, well, I don't know if I ever will. I do need a second monitor, yeah. I still raid with a second monitor.
What?
Yeah, this dude is an actual caveman.
If I had to, I would
plan a CRT?
No, unfortunately not. But if I had a second monitor, I would probably get distracted and then I'd play worse than I already do.
Okay.
And we can't be having that.
Fair enough.
Although having a rotation written down would be actually kind of nice, but I think I would lose track of where I am in the timeline.
Maybe you can write down your opener and stop using 7-second pre-pull parts.
That's only in T.
It's not.
And it's third second pot, okay?
Okay. Sfia.
Get it right.
Sfia.
Right. My Twitter and Twitch I'm going to put in the chat.
Okay.
Same as I do every time. Yeah, I stream a bit and tweet a bit. Yep.
And it's all FF Sfia or Sfia, and it's SFIA. Sfia. For everyone, not to be confused with the whatever it is, soccer something of association. Yeah, there's some sort of weird one out there that I've pinged a couple of times when I tried to include you on a tweet, but oh well. All right, Oryza.
Yeah, I guess follow. I also stream. I don't really tweet very often, but God, is it okay if I post those links?
Do you have? I don't know if you know what? Since you asked me, mod. Hold on.
Holy shit!
There you go.
Wow.
There you go. You are now a mod.
Power.
Ban everybody.
Time to time out everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, I stream. I don't really tweet, but you can follow me on Twitter, I guess. And if you're single, please message Tuls because he's looking for a girlfriend.
Damn it, I was gonna do that.
Oh, you messed up. Yeah, they don't know where to find Tuls though. Who is Tuls?
Dude, I'll post his Discord info. You know, Frosty, I put his Discord info in our group name when I submitted to the sheet, and then you just removed it, and I was what? Yeah.
100%. He submitted it with the Discord name in it.
I don't know. Maybe it clipped on the thing. Maybe I consciously took it off. I don't know. Sometimes I do that. Like I look at some of the names, I'm like, no.
You're the reason why he doesn't have a girlfriend. So
I guess so. Well, it's in chat right now, and you can see it on stream if you're watching this on YouTube. It's just some guy, or just somebody, or just something. There you go. You can figure it out. All right, Deon.
I don't really do much of anything, but I am on Twitter, Deon_Foxfangs, because for some reason Deon Foxfangs is like banned on Twitter, and I have no idea why. But
what'd you do?
Me. I don't know. I've never had that. I actually just changed that because I used to do YouTube stuff way back in the day that nobody cares about anymore because it's bad.
Yeah.
But
that's okay.
Yeah, but so I'm Deon_Foxfangs on Twitter. I'm just Deon Foxfangs on Twitch. Okay. I don't stream a whole lot, but sometimes I do dumb things like try to learn Black Mage and be bad at it. So. Okay. And have Ori make a trigger for every time I lose a Nokian.
I didn't do that.
Geez.
I didn't do that.
All right. Well, guys, I appreciate y'all again coming on. I appreciate everybody who came to watch the show. Sorry for a disconnect. That was completely my internet. It died 100%, but it came back up. So yay, I guess. Guys, and thank you very much for being a part of the World Race and following it and everything else and supporting us in the community as we move forward with this. Also, a special thank you to my wife, of course, who's in the background, always supporting me and everything, Kurara. Thank you very much to the person who lets me use their cover of the Final Fantasy VII battle music at the beginning and the end of the show. And thank you very much to Blizzana, who lets me use the artwork on the show that I commissioned out to him. And yeah, I think that should be it, guys. Thank you for watching. I know it's been a while. We are going to be back next week. We actually have a very lore impactful show, or lore packed show, I guess is the best way to say that. We have Ethis coming on. We have Anonymous. You guys should know who Ethis is. Ethis is definitely one of the biggest lore guys. Then you have Anonymous.
Right.
And
TV/Cleese.
Oh yeah, Cleese. Yeah, Cleese. Absolutely. Yeah. And we have Anonymous, who is responsible for helping Koji correct the lore book that he put out, who's going to be on to be talking about stuff. And we also have Mr. Klimps, who's coming on, who has done a lot of lore stuff for other games and is recently getting into Final Fantasy XIV. But it's going to be a pretty crazy show. Basically, I'm going to say, all right, you guys are in a room together, start talking and walk away. And that's going to be the show. But yeah, guys, be here next week for that. Otherwise, we'll have a very wonderful weekend, rest of your weekend, a very wonderful rest of your week. And we will see you next time. Bye, guys. Everybody say bye.
Bye.
See ya.
It's better than that. Bye. Jesus Christ. No.